So I was born in Southern California in the San Gabriel Valley, and lived there till I was about 7. And then my parents moved to Sacramento. And we moved there because my dad got transferred. And it was different coming from, back then it was still concrete in Southern California, lots of it. But we had a lot of parks, a lot of grass areas, and then moved to Sacramento, which was full of waterways and lots of outdoor activities for kids to do. And my parents put me in Catholic school, and I did really well in school. However, I spent most of my time sitting outside the classroom because I always talked a lot. And I could never understand why during tests, why I could get done so quickly, get good grades, and everybody else was still...
What decade was this with your elementary years?
So in the 60s was my elementary years. And then we moved back after 8th grade. We moved back to Southern California and back into the San Gabriel Valley, where I went to high school. And, it was interesting in high school. I was extremely bored my first 2 years in high school because everything I was doing, I did in 7th and 8th grade. And it was like, wow, public high school is sure behind the times, at least the schools I was going to, which was still a good school. Played a lot of sports. And, at the age of 12, I was starting to get noticed by folks in the baseball world. And I was starting to play with older guys and could hit, and I could see the ball really well. And it was interesting because, it proved well for me through high school because it was that added team element, the added, you have to get good grades to play. And so it forced discipline on me. I'm ADD. And so forced discipline isn't always easy to do on someone like that. And what it did for me, the baseball, it allowed me to be creative and to be a better student because I was able to remember plays, remember signs, remember all these things. And I started doing I was a good student, but got better as a student because I started remembering things based on the baseball field. Who's at first, second, third. And that's how I'd remember problems and remember a lot of things. And the one thing that I never did was I never competed with anyone. I always tried to be creative. And I'm wondering why that occurred. Through my 6-year-old to 17-year-old ages, not only was I a student and an athlete, I was a model. And I did a lot of runway. I did a lot of print ads. There was a company called Montgomery Ward's and Sears way back in the day, and I did a lot of pajama ads for them.
So you were a good-looking kid.
I was okay.
How did someone get into I guess just because of the area that you were at, they just needed kids?
It was interesting. My parents thought I should go to an acting class. And I went to an acting class because they said, you're always acting and goofing off, so you might as well go see what you can do. At the age of 9, I was making $75 an hour as a model. And I would work 10 hours.
Did you have other peers like that?
Yeah, I had other peers and started becoming friends with some of them. But it was an interesting world because it was all about glamour. It was all about what they told you could and couldn't do when you were under a contract. And that contract would be like, we tell you when to cut your hair. We tell you if we want you to dye your hair. We tell you if we want you to be fat, skinny, or whatever. And so fast forwarding to 16, 17, it was like, is this what I want to do, or do I want to play baseball? And so I stopped the modeling and all of that entertainment type stuff, banked a lot of the money.
So I have a few questions before we continue.
Yeah.
Was Hollywood as big as Hollywood is now back then?
In scale. So yeah, it was. And where I modeled was in Toluca Lake, which is where Bob Hope lived, and a bunch of celebrities because it just sat right outside of Hollywood.
Yeah.
And it was a very, very competitive
Because
landscape.
I guess what I'm trying to understand for myself is if you would have lived in some other state, you probably wouldn't have had that opportunity. It's
Not
partly
at all.
because of where you lived, the proximity to just all that, you were given that opportunity where if you're living in Indiana, that's just not happening.
No, because you're going to, and you hear the stories, right? People come to California or go to California to be noticed. I wasn't looking to be noticed. I just happened to go take a class, and someone that was teaching the class said, "Hey, we've got a gig. Your son should try out for it." And so I also, tried out for the middle Brady Kid. Bonanza had an episode that I taped and never made. It got on the cutting room floor and it never got into it. So it was interesting, and I do think that people that chase that dream go try to do everything they can to be in it, and they just focus on so much competition that it consumes them,
Right.
and they lose sight of what they're trying to do.
Yeah, and they call it the area of broken dreams. People
Yes.
go there, and
Yeah.
for every star that makes it, how many?
Oh, thousands.
Yeah,
It's not like
the percentages.
yeah, it's unreal. So I was looking, what's your shot playing baseball? I mean, versus that, and I was like, well, baseball could pay for a college education because if you're good in a high school sport, it's difficult for any kid to think they could make that jump right to the pros because of maturity. It's not about how good you are, it's about how well you handle adversity and failure because you fail a lot in sports. And for me, I got the opportunity to be invited to camp. And so I got invited to Angels camp and I made it.
This is like late
So-
high school.
Yeah, so this would be, I graduated in 78. So 79 was when I got invited to camp. And I made it. Everything was great. I stand around and there's all of these guys that I have baseball cards for, and they're all around me. And, there's guys like Bobby Grich and Nolan Ryan and Rod Carew. And I'm like, I'm 18. These guys, wow, this is amazing. And, all of that came to a screeching halt. I hit a double off the wall, go taking off, running. I slide head first into second base. The base pops up, kneecap goes snap. Worst thing was I was chewing tobacco and swallowed the tobacco. So I'm bleeding and throwing up all over second base. My position was catcher. And if you damage your knees, it's hard to get into that position
But
again.
you had a contract, right?
Yeah.
Talk about how you got in that position.
So, it was my grandfather who said, it was like, hey, I don't want to go play for these guys. I love the Dodgers. And he's like, look, you got a contract. You signed the contract. I thought contracts were in the entertainment field were restrictive. Sports contracts are extremely restrictive. I used to ride motorcycles, surf, skateboard. Everything that I like to do, I was written in a contract that I could not do. And if you did that, you ran the jeopardy of losing your contract. They wouldn't sue you. They would just cut you and terminate your contract. And so, you get injured, they will continue to pay you through your contract. And I could never rehabilitate myself. I was a 4.4 in the 40. I was very fast. I was a catcher who could hit for high average. I had power, not the power of these guys today who were, 400-foot home runs and stuff, but I had power. And I was more of a doubles kind of line drive hitter and quick. But when you go from a 4.4 in the 40 to 5.6, you just, and that was me going as fast as I could after rehabilitating for about 18 months. The worst thing about the injury was the depression.
Yeah.
I didn't want to see a game. I didn't want to do anything with the sport. I hated the sport. And I guess really when I look back at it, I hated myself.
Because that was how much was baseball part of your life? Like it was
It's it. That was
from
it.
because was it high school? Was it still baseball pretty part, or
Well,
was it the last few years of high school and then
so I played baseball all through high school, along with football and basketball, and I boxed. Um, and I was good at all of them, but I was really good at baseball. And so junior, senior year is where you start really honing your skills, where you are seeing guys that are 18, sometimes 19, throwing 80, 90, 95 with less control than in the majors and even in the minors. And so it was the last few years, junior and senior, where I would get up in the morning before school, hit 100 swings off a batting tee right-handed, 100 swings off the batting tee left-handed, through every sport, baseball, basketball, football, whatever. I did that every single day. And I was like, you can't compete with other people. You can only compete with yourself. You got to be creative and build your life around you. And you've got to really motivate yourself, because other people can't motivate you. They can, urge you to do something. They can inspire you to do something, but they really can't motivate you because you have to motivate yourself. And so with that, I really took it to heart that I was like, look, I want to play the game. And I will play the game before I enter into college, because I didn't want to, maybe I was foreshadowing in my head, I didn't want to get hurt in college, and that's where it ended.
so back then you could go into major. I don't think I think you have to do some kind of.
So you can
college
go
now.
straight from high school into professional sports, and you can go right into the big club. You have to be a really talented individual to do that, or they have a need. They needed catchers. But I wasn't going to stay a catcher at a 4.4 in the 40, and I could throw 90 miles an hour. So it was this rude awakening that it was snatched away,
Right.
in a single slide. And what that did, after I kind of got through that depression and the injury, I gained more perspective on life. And because I built everything around a sport, and I learned great teamwork. I learned how to, bring people up. I learned how to help myself. I learned how to deal with failure. Because you think about this, in baseball, if you hit 3 out of 10 times,
I know.
it's a 300 hitter and you'll make the Hall of Fame.
It's so crazy.
If you win 3 out of 10 times in business, you're looking for a new job.
Yeah.
So it's the reverse. But what it teaches you is how to deal with the adversity, how to deal with failures, and to just say, okay, that was that game. Let's move on to the next game. The problems become when the next game, and it's failure, 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 failure. You're either in the wrong sport, the wrong job, whatever, if you have continued failures and you're not learning from them and working on them. And I think one of the biggest things and I learned this early on, was dealing with defeat, and dealing with defeat as a team. Because I've been in the position where I've hit, it was a 1-0 game, and I come up and I hit a 2-run home run, and then the other team goes and hits more runs. I feel I did great. However, the team still loses. So it's that real weird reality where you can't celebrate yourself because your team lost, because it's an all-in type of thing. And I think that really did shape my business acumen, because I learned so much on how to deal with adversity through sports, not just injuries, but losing titles, losing things, taking it all, winning championships. losing the championship game, striking out in a critical moment, you learn to just keep your head high and walk away and then see what you can do to be better. And, that's kind of how I had grown up. Was my parents were blue collar workers. My dad worked in the railroad. My mom was a seamstress, but we had everything we ever wanted. I had everything I ever wanted. When Adidas came out with their first pair of white shoes with the black stripes, I got a pair. And it was really cool because I didn't feel that there were people at different levels. When I was growing up, I felt everybody was the same, because in my family, we had doctors, we had lawyers, we had my dad that worked in the railroad, but everybody made great money. And my grandfather, my dad's dad, was a truck driver. And he took me, when I was 12 years old, took me on a trip around the city and said, "Do you see that house?" Yeah. He goes, "I own it." "You see that one?" "I own it." "You see that one?" "I own it." And he took me around to like 6 houses. And he's like, "Yeah, I own all those." I go, "You drive a truck?" He goes, "It's not what you do. It's what you do with your money." And so I got a really good education very young in life on how to manage money, what money is really for. And I think that shaped me in keeping things in perspective, because like I said earlier, I was making $75 an hour, working about 10 hours a week as a model, as a kid.
Yeah.
And so I was like, what should I do with my money? He's like, just put it in the bank. What do you need as a kid? You got everything you need. And I had a paper route too. So I had that money coming in. But what it really did was it helped me shape who I am today and how I progressed through my life in understanding what money does for you. And you don't have to make a lot, but you have to work with your money a lot so that you can live a very good life as you age. So, I think that my first 20 years, if you will, was all the basis of a basic foundation of being polite, going to Catholic school. A lot of the rumors you hear about nuns being extremely strict and whacking somebody with a ruler, in my case, was true. I sat outside the classroom now because I talked a lot. And going back to that, I was thinking, what did that really do for me? And I'm like, well, that too was kind of an adversity, right? Here you are being penalized because you're a good student, you got all your work done, but then you're saying, "Hey, come on, we can go out and play when we finish these tests." And I was wondering why my buddies weren't done. And so finally got a nun, Sister Audrey, who said, "I got a brother that's just like you. So when you finish, you go to the front of the classroom, go get the erasers, go take them outside, clap them, get them clean, go find something to do, and then come back. But don't disrupt the classroom." So I think I learned some really good skill sets in how to control oneself in larger settings when other folks have things that they need to be doing, and you're not interrupting folks when they're doing a lot of their work. And people, even nowadays, are disrupted quite easily. And I find that very interesting. But, those first 20 years they were fun. They were a lot of fun.
So there's a lot to unpack there. One is, so I was reading a book, Jonathan Haidt, and he's comparing like past generations to the current generation, and they would call it play. Basically, up until cell phones became popular, young people played a lot. And now they don't do that because they're too busy scrolling on their phones. And so for you spent the first 20 years of your life living real life, interacting, and you've hit a few points that have come to agree with just over the past years. Just thinking, the older you get, you think more about life deeply. Maybe not everyone, but I do. Also having kids, it's like, okay, how do I get a certain outcome if that's what I'm looking for. And so sports, I mean, we've talked before, my
Yeah.
kids are in sports, and everything you said about sports, like, yeah, that's why I do it. I don't know another way to recreate that outside of sports, unless maybe you're a part of drama or
Mhm.
part of some kind of team. That's hard to recreate that. And if you're on your phone all day, you're not getting any of those life skills.
None. Not at all.
And so they're showing that, like, now, like, there's plenty of scientific data now that's like, we called it social networking. It's actually the opposite. It's anti-social.
Yeah.
All these programs that kids are on. So as a parent, we make sure that kids aren't on social media. They don't do all that stuff. Not because we think it's necessarily evil. It's more or less, are they interacting in the real world? Because if you're not, you are missing out on a lot of that development your first 20 years. So it's interesting hearing you say that, because that's a lot of thoughts that I've been having. You hit on internal motivation. Now in your late 60s, early 60s, 60s, have you, the thing I'm like, when my wife and I decided to homeschool, I said, hey, as long as they know the basics, as long as they can read, write, and learn to think, then if they can do that really well, but the other component is have internal motivation, because then they can go self-learn, self-whatever, that's great. And so we've done that with our kids. The oldest, he can learn things really well. Like when we wanted him to learn how to type, I said, here's the program, figure it out. And within a year, he's typing 60 words a minute. So that was internal motivation. Now with the other kids, we'll see how that works out. But just, he was the type of kid, because he learned to read really well and to write really well and to think really well, you can then give him something. He can watch a YouTube video on how to do a certain skill in basketball, and he'll go out there and execute it. So he was able to just self-taught. But how do you, because you said you can externally try to motivate someone, but how do you get someone to be internally motivated?
So that's a difficult thing to do, right? That's the one difficult thing to do. And I run an insurance agency now, that's 300 agents. And so this is my constant, it's not a struggle or a battle, it's my constant purpose. My purpose in life is to help others be the best in themselves. And so for internal motivation, I think it stems from you yourself. It doesn't matter what your upbringing has been, because environment doesn't have to be the issue, because we see people come from horrible areas and having a very successful life. And you see people that come with like the silver spoon in their mouth, and they don't make anything out of themselves. I think what happens is there's this internal mechanism that when you have a purpose in your life, and if you are honest with yourself, which is hard for a lot of people, right? You give yourself breaks all the time. Oh, I'm not going to eat healthy today. But if you look at, here's my purpose, here's my goals. Everybody in life should have more than one singular goal, right? I want to make more money. Well, that's not that's a singular goal. But how do you get there? How do you do that? I think for me, in looking at answering your question, when you have a purpose and you have gratitude about where you are at currently, and you tell yourself, every day I'm going to make a decision to be closer to my goals and my purpose. I'm going to act with purpose in my life. I'm going to move forward. When you do that, and each day you hit a milestone, because you should be reaching forward to something every day, you can then motivate yourself, because you are winning forward. You're not competing, but you're winning for yourself. You're gaining momentum for yourself. And so I reward myself every time I reach a milestone goal. My weird thing is I like all types of dress shoes and all types of tennis shoes. And when I reach some milestones, I'm gone to Nordstrom's, or I'm, online looking for a really cool tennis shoe, and I reward myself with that. And so I think that when people lose sight and say, "Oh, I got to get my goal is so far out there," you never hit it when it's that far out, and then you have the internal strife that you are not reaching your purpose and your goals, and then you start to self-sabotage yourself. And I think that for me personally, by doing these little goals, by setting these milestones where I can reward myself, I'm motivated to reach that reward. If I don't reach what I just set myself out for, then I don't reward myself. I don't beat myself up, but then I analyze myself at the end of the day, the end of the week. Were all the actions that I took today or this week a success or a failure? Now, that's a hard line, but you got to draw a black and white line because it's success or failure. So if you say, I'm going to go work out the next 5 days in a row, and you don't work out the next 5 days in a row, then your promise to yourself is a failure. Where if you tell yourself, my goal is to have fitness on a daily basis, that doesn't mean going to the gym. It's lace up your tennis shoes and go take a walk. Mm-hmm. It could be working in the yard. It could be swinging an axe. It could be pushing a mower. But it's about getting yourself over the hump. Some people will listen to The Secret. Some people will listen to Wallace Wattles' The Science of Getting Rich. Some people listen to a pastor or some other thing to help them motivate themselves. If those are the auditory clues that make you turn on your inner pilot to help you get to your goals, you will then motivate yourself. Unless you have the drive to move forward towards your purpose, I feel no one will motivate themselves.
Do you have a case study where you took someone that you saw had almost no motivation, and then you were able to help them?
I actually wrote a white paper on that for United Healthcare when I worked for them. I'd started with this company, United Healthcare, and I started out, it was called an agent manager. And we were given a goal for sales that year. And 3 weeks into the annual enrollment period, we were 25% of goal. And when we forecasted and looked at our run rate, we're like, we're going to finish 79% of goal, and none of us are going to be here. And so what I did was, I'm like, what are we going to do? We have to get the agents to pay attention to us, to our plan, not anybody else's plan, right? None of the other insurance companies. So we came up with this thing where we would do, I call them call blitzes. We'd invite 40, 50 agents into the office from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. We'd feed them pizza. We'd feed them whatever, kebabs. We had, Southern California, we had good food all around us. And our numbers started going exponentially higher and higher and higher to where 4 weeks after that first 3-week period, we're 120% over goal. And I started taking notes on that. What did I do? What did we do? And I got selected after this enrollment period because I finished 150% over goal. I was awarded the highest award at United Healthcare, an Eagle Award. And it puts you through a year-long program with all of the CEOs, the CFOs. We were all C-level educated. 12 of us, we went to Minnesota, we'd fly around, and we started presenting case studies of what we found that worked to motivate agents and to increase enrollments. So the one thing that I found that the case study, and I had several case studies, it was nothing more than grabbing someone's attention, listening to what their personal goals were for themselves, helping them create a 1 or 2 page business plan. When I was at United, I had to put, it was like 60 to 80 pages every year. I had to build a business plan. And I'm like, I don't need all of this. I just need 1 or 2 pages because everything's based on cause and effect. You have different silos of where you can go find clients. You had different methodologies, but you had to have several lines in the water to take advantage of that. And so what I did is I started connecting with agents. And if I found enough of these agents that belonged to an agency, then I would identify the agency owner and then get that agency owner to partner with me to bring more education to these folks. The more we brought education to them, the more they started going out into the community because they had more confidence in themselves. And as I helped them with any kind of answer they needed, how to run the computer for themselves, even if it was their own, how to work Outlook. It was like, okay, here's how you do it. Here's how you do the lead system for United Healthcare. I'm having trouble with the Aetna one. Well, I know how that works too, because a friend of mine works over there, and here's what you do. And so you start building a true relationship based on what they want, what their needs are. And then to get them to buy into that, you become their check person. And when we started doing that as a collective group, I was getting 5 agencies, each one with 30 to 50 agents in each one of them. Mm-hmm. And most of their agents were operating at about 65 to 70% efficiency because they were like the duck with one foot and just kept going in circles in the water because they didn't have a direction. They didn't know what they wanted. Mm-hmm. They just knew they had to get enrollments to make money. But that didn't tell them what they wanted. They didn't have a goal for themselves. They didn't have a goal that said, hey, look, I want to make $60,000 next year. And the year after, I want to have enough money in the bank to buy a car and put 50% down. So I started creating these methodologies for them and created spreadsheets on how to forecast, their income. And then I got them to look at, all right, what's your closing ratio? Every time you sit down with a client, you should have a 50-50 chance of closing a deal. Mm-hmm. I was dealing with agents that had 25 and 30% closing rates who were great on the phone, but the minute they got in front of people, they kind of froze up. They had no confidence in themselves. And so the case study in all of those agencies took every agent who was at that low efficiency rating, we made them above 100% efficient to the point where they got so good at what they did and they had so much confidence in themselves, the confidence exudes to the consumer. And the consumer's like, yeah, I'm going to go with Dan because he knows what he's talking about and I want him to be my agent for the rest of my life. And you taught these agents, I teach them, that you need to work backwards. You need to think, I have a client, this client's my client for life. So I want them for life. And these agents get paid renewals for as long as that client stays with them. Mm-hmm. So it's very lucrative. And so when you have that end in mind, that you're really building a relationship because this person is going to send you 10 clients without having to do any marketing. And you start building your book of business in reverse. I'm going to think about what it's going to take me to have 1,000 clients in 5 to 10 years. All right. And that's a big number. But then you start to say, all right, I need to boil this down to where, what activities do I need to do to get in front of so many people so that I can get so many appointments and know that those appointments, I'm going to close half of my clients and the other ones just might not be ready. And so taking all of these folks, we created such a system. Actually, I say we because I talk as a team, but the paper that I produced, the 5 teams was 145 agents in those 5 teams, produced annually about 500 enrollments. After the 12-month period of putting them through the training, It was 2,400 enrollments out of that same group,
Wow.
the same group. And the only thing that changed the dynamic was getting to those folks, finding out what their purpose and their needs were, getting them to put it down on paper, and then to be commit to their goal, and then to have me or another manager check on them to see how well they're doing and if they're reaching their goals. I could tell if they're reaching their goals through the computer system just looking at United Healthcare. I couldn't tell what they were doing for the other carriers. They'd share it with me. And the one thing that they loved was the once a month that I would come around to each one of those agencies. They couldn't wait to tell me what successes they had. And you know, as a dad, you're very excited when your kid's hitting threes, right? I mean, it's very fun to watch that. You feel really proud because you know he's been working on it.
Yeah.
And so when I would see that, these are my students. And my students are doing well because they're working on it. They're practicing and they're putting out effort. And I think that effort and the results that come in help build that internal motivation to keep them going forward. I mean, you know, if an agent writes 100 enrollments a year, after 5 years, so beginning of year 6, their residual income, passive income, is about $18,000 to $24,000 a month without having to go see any clients.
Right.
That's where the problem comes in now, because they got so much money coming in, they don't think I got to keep filling in the pot, because people die, people move. And so it seems to be that after that 5-year period, you got to go remotivate these folks. And you don't remotivate them. You got to bring them into the reality of, hey, you're 38. Are you stopping now because your book's going to slowly dwindle? You're making decent money now. But if you kept doing this, and we have, I don't know, about 10 of our 300 agents have 1,000 to 4,000 clients that they get $25 per client per month.
Yeah.
And so, you know, that's a motivator for someone. And so I would also use my case studies to talk to these other agencies and say, look, here's a case in point. Here's a case in point. And I think those things really do help people move from a competitive plane to a creative plane, because you have to start thinking, I can't compete with other agents, and no one should compete with
And
anyone.
it's very short term.
Yeah, I mean, even
There's a very few people that are thrive off of high competition like that.
yeah, and when you find that, those are high-end tennis players.
Yeah. And I think it also leads to a lot of toxicity
Oh,
when you are thriving off of, and you may want that in certain environments, but not in environments where you're actually trying to help with people.
Yeah.
If it's toxic at work because this guy has this many and you're here, and just leads to a lot of toxicity. But as a manager, that's an easy way to try to motivate people. Oh, look at John. He's doing way better than you. What are you going to do about it?
and see, as for me, I never go down that road, because I always felt I never competed with anyone. People competed with me. I had, in sports, in football, I was a middle linebacker and a fullback. Well, I had to practice my roles and what I did. And I just wanted to be the best me that I could be. I wasn't really the guy that got handed the ball to go run the touchdowns. Those are usually the halfbacks or the tailbacks. As a fullback, it was, okay, Larry, you go down punch through the line so the guy can run over your back and try to score, So, and then as a linebacker, my role was to just tackle. I didn't try to hurt anybody.
Right.
But we also learned this thing called, it was karate said backwards. And basically what it was when you went to tackle someone, you didn't hit them and stop. You tackled through them. And so that leads to brutal hits. And football's a brutal game. But there's playing the game aggressively, and then there's playing the game where you're trying to hurt someone.
Right.
And in baseball, it can be very aggressive too. I played during the no slide, or you could slide and take out a catcher. You didn't have to slide. You could just take them out. Fortunately, in my height, I was able to squat lower than most of the guys coming in and could throw them over my shoulder. But with that said, it comes back to people competing. And when they compete, they're trying to be like someone else or do something else, and they lose their identity. And so for me, it was always just be the best player you can be. Get into best business. Be the best you that you can be. Think creatively. Think outside the box. Take risks. And the risks should be calculated. I'm not going to say I never shot from the hip, because we all do every once in a while, because there isn't a game plan for something that's occurring live, and you got to improvise. And that takes creativity, and it doesn't take competition. And I think with competition, you really get to see how parents become involved in competition when you get into Little League. You get into the youth basketball leagues, and you get into the youth football leagues. The kids want to just play. But then you listen to the stands, you listen to coaches, and some coaches, not all, but some, will, in football, teach the kids to try to hurt other kids. And that's not good for the game, and it's not good for the kids, right? Because then that can translate to them later in life. If I want to get through to somebody, I got to hurt them.
Right.
And that's a horrible mentality. You know, when I played baseball, there was a lot of throwing at guys. And usually it wasn't at the head. It was usually at the shoulder, or getting the guy to turn and hit him square in the back. That's a wrong thing to do. I always advocated throwing inside to push somebody off the plate, and so they would respect the pitcher. But this whole thing has evolved where parents get involved. I was coaching a Little League game, and I'm friends with both, and I was coach, and friends with both of the teams, because it was the Little League of the city we lived in. And the pitcher on our team, he liked to throw inside. And he threw inside, and the ball got away from him and hit the coach's son, the manager's son. So after the game, everybody's shaking hands, and the managers are at the end of the line, you know, like the kids all come through, shake hands, and they're all, no matter what happens in the game, they shake hands, they get their snow cone ticket, and they go to the snack bar, and the game's done. They don't care anymore because they're going to get their treats. All of a sudden, I'm standing on the mound, and the manager of our team and the manager of the other team, they're just jaw-jacking with one another. And the next thing you know, a hand is on the one guy's throat, and I'm like, oh man. And kids are all of a sudden coming back from the snack bar, and they're watching this, and parents are watching this, and I get in between them, and oh man, I got right on my chin. I took a punch. But after I got hit, you know, the umpire comes out, and every fans come out of the stands, and two of the moms were the moms from each other, you know, the husbands' wives, were like, what are you trying to present to these kids? You're adults. And the wives were just, oh man, they were just really angry at their husbands, rightfully so. Because this is what these kids are learning. And they're, as a coach, you're extremely responsible, not only for their safety, but their mental health as well. And people don't get it. People really don't get it. And, you know, I could spend hours on that, but the best management training I ever received was coaching Little League.
Hmm.
And I went through Little League coaching classes, and I've never seen anywhere where the focus was on the mental health at that young age. And my son played on the team, and it was really cool because, a kid has a ball hit to him and it goes between his legs and the run comes in. Coaches will scream at that kid. The kid already knows he messed up. So, you learn these things to say, hey, all right, way to get in front of the ball, because he was in front of the ball.
Mm-hmm.
He was perfectly set up to catch that ground ball and to field it. He just didn't have his glove on the ground. So I yell out, hey, all right, good try, way to get in front of the ball. Next time, let's get your glove down. And he's like, okay.
Yeah, positive reinforcement.
And you see tears, and this kid's playing second base. He was not a power hitter. He was just, he'd get base hits. He could bunt, and he was fast. And so he comes in and he's like, I'm so sorry. And he's apologizing to the team. And one of his teammates said, well, just hit a home run. Everything will be good. He comes up to bat. This kid's little. Cracks one over the fence. And he's like, okay, does everybody like me now? And they're like, we've always liked you. And I think that in and of itself, that was lucky, right?
Right.
He got a fastball. It was in his zone. He had his hips and he popped it out. It was a good swing. He never made an error after that again.
Mm-hmm.
His glove was on the ground. He actually wore out his glove, the fingertips of the glove, because he used to shove it into the dirt.
Yeah.
But I think that taught me, you can't yell at employees. You can't yell at other individuals, because you're never going to get the results that you want for them. Not out of them,
Yeah.
for them.
It's the easy way to respond as a parent or as a... Anytime I see a boss yell, immediately my respect for them goes down dramatically. Because the only time I think that's okay is if you're in the military and it's life and death.
Yes, or if you're yelling at someone and there's a serious injury could occur. Right?
Yeah.
So,
but boss to employee or employer to employee, never okay. Because it's like, unless you're about to die, like in the military, there's a reason why they yell at you, because it's like, hey man, when there's bullets flying, that's real stress.
yes.
So yes, I'm going to yell at you because I want you to be prepared for that kind of stress. But if Sally said something wrong or didn't close the client or whatever it is, it's like, it's not worth yelling over, because you've now damaged her. It's just, but it happens so much because that's the easy way to respond, is you feel like you're winning over them because you said whatever you said. But yeah, I don't.
You're damaging them. You are damaging them, even if it's snide remarks. The people always kid with people, but when they're snide remarks and they're made to be digs, and they're said in front of other folks or even individually one-on-one, that's never okay. And the interesting thing is, it happens in every workplace.
Yeah.
It continues to happen in every workplace.
So we're still in your 20s. We've gone to different tangents, which I enjoy. One tangent I would like your thoughts on is, we've discussed how important sports are, especially for development of children. But there comes a point where I think it becomes too obsessive for that individual, so that once they get into college and then once they get into their adulthood, they're still obsessing over sports.
Yeah.
They're watching it. They're sitting all day Saturday, all day Sunday. And it's like, and so as a parent, I want to make sure I give my kids, draw the line for them to be like, hey, I have you involved with sports, but it's not so you're obsessed with it for the rest of your life. It's because there are skills that I want you to learn, right? Like conditioning. The only reason it just so happened that they were decent at basketball, which is great, but the whole point they're playing basketball isn't to be good at basketball. It's because I want you to exercise your body. That was the bigger picture. Mm-hmm. It makes it more fun that you're good at it, right? That you can go to the Y and destroy every team. And they played their old team. I think I told you, there was a game where they switched teams. Mm-hmm. So the first year he won a championship with that team. The second year he was with that team, but the culture just wasn't great. And so we had an opportunity for them to join another team. And the coach of it used to play college basketball Division II. So I was like, great, that should be a great fit. And so they were able to be coached by that guy, and he coached more with positive reinforcement, where the other coaches were more the negative reinforcement, yelling, screaming, stuff like that. So they had an opportunity to play the old team, and they had 5 versus 4, and my boys beat them. So that was a lot of fun. But again, it was more of just the reason why I have them do all that stuff is the skills, right? But I think what happens too often now is these boys or girls that played sports at a young age, once they get out of high school or college, now they're watching the sport. And I guess what would you say about that is, how do you make sure that that person doesn't become, you see all these adult men, what are they doing on their weekends, their evenings? They're sitting on the couch watching sports. So how do you make sure that it doesn't become too obsessive to the point where they shut off life and they're no longer, I don't know.
So that's an interesting point you bring up. I am semi-guilty of that. So if the Mariners are on, the Dodgers are on, my 2 favorite teams, the game is on, either on the radio or on television.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not sitting in front of the TV.
Mm-hmm.
I like the white noise, the background noise, and kind of listening to it while I'm doing stuff. I could be working, whatever. I find that obsessive behavior of, I've got to watch my team, I got to do this. The team wins or loses with or without you.
Mm-hmm.
You're not there, and you're not in any way able to shape the outcome of any game. And people bet on them. People, have fantasy sports.
That's huge. I remember when that came out. Did it come out in baseball first?
I think it did.
Because I remember when I was in my middle school years or early high school, one of my teachers was played fantasy baseball, and I was like, that's interesting, because what did they do? They got all these people to now be engaged in the sport, and it's not even about their team anymore, right? And even now when you're watching football games, at the end they're talking about their fantasy points, and you're like, what? We're not even talking about the actual game, we're talking about how many fantasy points. So that's a whole different conversation. But I guess, is there a danger in becoming over obsessed, or
I think so.
you've probably come across men like that.
I have good friends that are like that.
And I don't know if it's necessarily wrong, but it's like you're having I don't know if you're limiting your life, but it's like, hey, there's
a friend. He's an avid Lakers fan, and when LeBron James' son Bronny got selected to be on the Lakers, he called me crying because he was so ecstatic for this. I go, dude, do you have season tickets? No. Do you have the Laker pass to watch the game, the local in-network games? No. Then why the emotion? Well, it's a father-son. I go, there's plenty of those have been out there.
Mm-hmm.
I go, this will be the last year that LeBron's going to play, because he wanted to play 1 year with his son, and then he's going to be done. Mm-hmm. He's like, oh, that's painful too, and what are we going to do? I go, who cares?
Yeah.
He goes, don't you like the Lakers? I go, yeah, but I'm not married to them.
I wonder how many percentage of guys are like that, where they're that.
A
lot. I feel like there's more than there should be.
I think there's a lot, and I don't want to shame any of the fans. Right?
I'm not shaming it, but just more like
no. And what I mean is, like, you go to a game, go to a Seahawks game, and just look at people get so vested in the game. Mm-hmm. You go to, I went to Wisconsin, I went to a Green Bay game, the Packers game, and it was so cold out. There's guys with no shirts, and a P and then an A and a C painted on their chests, and you're like, wow, are you really that diehard of a fan? I don't knock them for it. They love their sports teams. But when all you do is sit down, watch the game, go to a bar and watch the game, when you do that obsessively, you are not doing something else.
Right. And that's where it's like,
That's the trade-off.
in Rome, what did they do with the peasants? They fed them the gladiator games. Why? Because there were other real life problems going on, but they're like, if we feed them games, we feed them bread, the circus, right? Then that will distract them from what's really going on. And I guess that's really the ultimate thing. I guess if everything else in your area is going great, then go ahead and do all that. But if you look at your society and you're saving all these issues, but you're not involved, but you're, highly involved with other stuff that literally does not matter. I guess this is the priority. Where's your priority?
You give up something.
Mm-hmm.
Look, I'll go to, several Mariners games. I'll go to Kraken games. I don't go anymore to the Seahawks games because I don't like the pitch of the stadium. I don't like the height.
Yeah.
But I go to the game and I'm done with the game.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's an event. I'm taking my kids. Actually, I don't even like baseball. I have respect for it. I just don't like it.
It's a long, boring game. It can be a long,
there you
boring
go.
game.
And for you understand the strategy. So I'm actually taking my boys this Friday. I think they're doing fireworks. So there's a couple guys are going, and then I'm going to take my boys. And for me, it's just that experience for them. They don't even like baseball, but it's more like, hey, these guys are going. They've gone to a few, and so for us, it's an experience. They're going to spend that one evening, but we're not going to watch. How many games are there now? 160 something.
165.
Yeah. So
that's a long season.
Yeah.
Let me tell you.
We're not going to sit there, and even with basketball and football, like when that season picks up again, we don't sit there and watch all 2.5 hours. We may watch a few minutes of the first and maybe a few minutes of the fourth. And the same thing with basketball, because it's like, look, we're not going to spend 2.5 hours or 3 dedicating our time to the sport because we should be out with my boys. Like, we're going to be out there. I'd much rather be playing the sport.
Is that your first?
I've been to a baseball game. I went to a game. Yeah, I don't go to them that often. The last time I went to a Mariners game was like 10 years ago.
And so
for them, that will be their first professional.
And they'll like it.
Yeah.
They'll like it because if if the Mariners are winning,
yes, hopefully they do,
and the crowd is going,
it's firework night. So,
and when the crowd's motivated and happy, it's infectious.
Yeah.
And I do notice a difference when I go down to a Dodgers game and I come to a Mariners game. Dodger fans are more boisterous. Generally, the stands are packed and sold out every single game. I mean, now they have Shohei Ohtani on their team. So he himself brings in another element of extra folks along with all the other great players on that team. And the Mariners pack the house too. And I think your boys will really enjoy it because it's an event.
Right.
And I think as long as people keep that perspective, I'm going to an event. Like when I go to a Kraken game, I do have a Kraken jersey. I do like the Kraken. I've never played hockey in my life. I can't even skate. I would like to have played hockey because I like the aggressiveness, the physical play of hockey. And I enjoy it. I enjoy rooting that team on. And one of our insurance company partners has a suite there. So I'm kind of spoiled when I go to a Kraken game.
Nice.
So I go watch the game and I go back into the suite and I eat and, talk to people and then I go back out. But I'm not at the railing and banging on the glass.
Yeah. And you're someone that's like, hey, sport, like we both like sports, but it's not the top priority. And if you're a male or woman listening to this, just look at your life. And if it's the top priority, maybe.
And are you a coach getting paid? Then yes, that's probably a top priority for you. If you're a student athlete, you have 2 top priorities. One, first and foremost, is you're a student and you have to get good grades. And secondarily, if you are committed to a school team, well, you have to be the best you can be at your position, and you've got to be an even better student. Because the better student you are, the easier any game becomes because you are able to peel it apart, to break it down, and to understand it. Kids today in sports, and all major league teams do this except for the California Angels, iPads in every dugout, analyzing your last swing, analyzing what the pitcher's throwing. Cheat mechanisms, that are there. No one is saying you can't and can't do that. But the manager of the Angels is like, you don't know what you're looking at if you're the player. You need someone to objectively talk to you about that. So if you want to go look at what you just did, you come and get one of the managers and we'll show you on our iPad and then help you because you can't always see what you're doing wrong.
Yeah, and that's one thing when I talk to my boys and we play a lot of 2-on-2. And whenever there's a call, right? And I have to reinforce to them your bias towards yourself. It's very rare that you're going to call a travel or whatever on yourself. And so you have to be willing to accept when someone else makes that call. Because you're not going to be like, oh, yeah, man, I totally did that thing. So just reinforcing that. But there was a question I wanted to ask earlier, since we're still on the topic of sports. When you were excelling at baseball, what do you think separated you from your peers? Was it if you were all putting in the same amount of work? Do you think at that point it was just genetics? Or because the reason why I asked
So I can answer this. My grandfather played semi-pro baseball and was a professional boxer. He was in Ireland. He was a professional boxer. And then when he moved to the United States, he fell in love with baseball and was able to play. My dad was also a semi-pro baseball player. World War II changed that for him. Right?
Yeah.
I was playing catch with and hitting off of older people from a very young age. And I think from my years through Little League, I was a little bit more above average because I just played with people who were a little bit older and the balls were thrown to me a little bit faster. What kind of separated me going into high school was the work ethic that I put into the sport year round. I am not a believer in, I'm sorry, everybody, in travel ball teams.
That's a huge industry.
I've got friends with kids in travel ball teams and, 8, 9, 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds, and all they ever do is play baseball. All they ever do is become a pitcher. And I'm like, what do you people, I think the great game is great, but when you talk to any Major League Baseball player, you'll find that they played multiple sports. They didn't want to keep playing the same game over and over again. And when you have these things like travel ball teams, kids don't usually play for one. They play for a couple travel ball teams. And if a kid's a pitcher, he's pitching on both teams. There's only so many throws in a person's arm. When kids get hurt and their arms suffer in Little League, it's not from throwing a curveball. It's from over pitching, overuse. The kid doesn't know when to stop.
Right.
That's the responsibility of the parent.
Right. And I have
coaches.
to do that with my kids. Be like, hey, chill.
Yeah.
You did your thing. Take a break.
I would take 100 swings left-handed, 100 swings right-handed off a tee, 5 a.m. every morning. My neighbors got mad because I was hitting into the fence, and they bought me a mesh net. And he's like, I'm buying this for you so I can sleep an extra hour before I have to go to work. He goes, I know what you're trying to do, but stop hitting it into the fence and hit into the net. And I did. And that was a really nice gesture. But with that said, the separation is from how much work you're willing to put in. And I felt that I put in a great work ethic to get good results. When I wasn't getting results, I would struggle and not know what was going on. And, outside of baseball season, there wasn't really a lot of coaches to coach you because the head baseball coach was the quarterback coach on the football team. So he's got other responsibilities during the time of the year. And so I would go to my dad and my grandfather. And so my grandfather one day, he's like, so what's your problem? I go, I can't hit a curveball. He goes, you're right. I'm like, what do you mean I'm right? He goes, well, you believe you can't, and so you won't. So you got to start believing you can. And that's just setting the tee in a little closer so that you can turn your hip and hit the ball. You're not being thrown the curveball, but it either ends up inside, sometimes off your back foot, or if a guy throws a slider, it could be on the outside. So it's moving the batting tee around, but just working and putting in effort. And I think that in and of itself, I wasn't blessed with super talented genes. I mean, I ran 4.4 in the 40, so that's fast. And throwing 90, that's fast. Those I had, but it was a grind to get that swing smoothed out. It was a grind to be behind the plate every single game, and learning to deal with injuries and learning to deal with playing hurt made me a stronger player.
Were you an only child?
No, I have a sister. She's 13 years older than me.
Okay, so it was like
It's like living as an only child. So my sister got married at 19 or so. So after that, it was just me and my parents in the house. So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But my dad played with me every day. Every single day he played. He'd get home from work and he's like, where's your glove? Come on, let's go. And we'd play catch. And if I threw the ball over his head or threw it to where it wasn't a good throw, he didn't go get it. I had to go get it. And so he was conditioning me to throw the ball at target and to make good throws. And my brother-in-law played high school baseball, played junior college baseball. He's like, come on, let's go. Let's go hit. Let's go to the cages. Let's go there. They kept me occupied because I think that they enjoyed it too. It was a way for them to connect with me, but it still brought them back to when they were playing as kids.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing that even as I got to progress through all the levels, I was able to play a kid's game and make an adult living. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, I like that because that's kind of how I've felt about could I put my kids into all these programs for basketball at this age? It's like, sure, but at what's the point? And again, I met this dude in the sauna and had never seen him before, never talked to him before, and I was like, you can when you come to a stranger, you can choose to not interact or you can put yourself out there and see where it goes. And this dude ends up being the father of the kid who was the number one basketball player in the state of Washington. And I just randomly met him like a few weeks ago. And we had a really cool conversation, right? And it was just like, his kid's 19, 6'8", pretty good. I mean, to be number one in the state. And he was like, don't spend extra money on your kid. If your kid's that good, they'll come to you. And that was really cool to hear because it's like sometimes you may have the thought of, okay, if my kid is showing whatever in this area, I need to double down or triple down on it. And I should be putting him in all these programs. I'm being a bad father if I'm not, because I'm not giving him that opportunity. It's like, no, just like I'm doing what happened to you when you were a kid. Like I'm going out there playing with them. I have him playing with guys that did play Division II basketball. So they're not out there on a team traveling around the state or traveling into other states. Because you can do that at their age, but what's the point, right? What's the point of them traveling to all these different tournaments? And so I'm happy with the way we are doing things, and it was cool talking to this guy who's like, I just went through that. He's gonna play at Division I basketball and maybe make it to the NBA. Who knows? So it'll be cool because we're gonna track him now. Caleb Kofu or something and see kind of what happens to his career. But it was really cool having that conversation with him. And he was just like, if your kid's that good, you don't have to go do all
They'll
that
find
stuff.
you.
Yeah. So yeah, it made me feel good about what I'm currently doing, because could I be doing more? Sure. But at the end of the day, he's going into 7th grade. You don't have to get that crazy with everything. Like, let him work on his individual skills. And if he is that good, then, you know. But a lot of basketball comes down to height, right? If that same kid who's 6'8" was 6'1", would he be given the same opportunities? Probably not.
No, unless he was able to pop threes constantly during like a, what's her name? Caitlin Clark, right?
Yeah.
You know, but
A lot of it just comes down to height. You could be really, really good, but if you're 5'10", it's like
and that's the good thing about baseball.
height doesn't matter as much.
No.
Yeah.
You know, you look at most catchers in the league, they're 5'10" to 6 feet tall. There are taller ones, but then you watch the umpires trying to look over them, right? Because you can only squat so far when your back's so long.
Yeah. All right. So we've gone a lot of interesting tangents, which I appreciate. And that's kind of the point. I mean, before we started, I told you I like talking to guys of your age because you're articulate. You've had a lot of different experiences, and I know I'm getting stuff out of it. But going back to your oral history of where now we're kind of in your 20s, your baseball season, your baseball career is over at this point because you've been injured. You were depressed for a couple years.
Yep.
I think a lot of people kind of go through that. Sometimes it's not even injuries; they just graduate college, and it's not even always a sport, but if they had something driving them for so long and then that ends, how did you get out of that depression? And then what was the next step or stage?
Well, that's a great question. So how did I get out of that stage? I think there was some room, some time had passed, right? There was a buffer zone that had kind of naturally occurred.
Yeah.
I started watching bits of games, and then I got invited to go to a Dodger game, and I went reluctantly, and then I had the best time of my life at the game. The people that I was with were having a great time. The crowd was having a great time. The Dodgers were winning. And it was against the San Francisco Giants. So there was a rivalry mix there because I was not a fan of the Giants. I've always been a fan, and I love that rivalry between the two. And then I saw some guys that knew me and was like, "Hey, what have you been up to?" And I was like, "Oh, I've just been hanging out and going to school. I went back to college." And it's like, they're like, "So, you picking up the glove again? You putting on the tools anymore?" I'm like, no, not even softball. And I went, softball. So, I started looking around and I felt that one way to pull myself out was to go back and play the game again. I had opportunities because everybody wanted me to play on their hardball team, their wood bat league, and travel around Southern California. I'm like, no, I don't want to do it. And a buddy of mine, I was going to college, and I worked.
What were you studying?
Biomedical engineering first, and so I was putting time in. I wanted to be a orthopedist that replaced knees or built knees.
Yeah, because of
the injury.
Yeah.
And so, I didn't realize how much engineering was behind that. I was good in math, but I was like, whoa, this is kind of odd. And so I was working in a hospital at the same time, so I could understand things. And I was working in the emergency room and working in the x-ray department. And we had a call come in, and a gunshot wound to a 12-year-old or 10-year-old. And I'm in the emergency room, and in comes the kid, was shot with a 12-gauge shotgun, point blank to his chest.
Were their kids just playing around or something?
Yeah, it was the 12-year-old's. The 12-year-old was the one that pulled the trigger. The 10-year-old was the one that was killed. He ended up dying.
Friends or siblings?
Siblings. And so I'm in the emergency room. Just so happens that a pediatric cardiologist was coming in to see his mom in the hospital. And he just immediately, Dr. Lance saw him and said, whistled at him to come over. He had his hand in the kid's chest, squeezing his heart to keep him alive. I was like, this is so intense. And I started forgetting about my issues because I'm watching a kid die in front of me. He's dead, really. And the mom is there. She's hysterical. The dad comes in, and the sheriff's department was there, threw the dad down onto the ground and arrested him for child endangerment because he left his shotgun under the bed loaded. And that traumatic experience said, nope, medicine is not for you, because I couldn't deal with that. And it really realigned my thoughts.
Yeah.
And so I went back to figure out what I could do in school. And I finished with behavioral economics. So it's a degree with psychology and a degree with economics. It's not the study of guns and money or guns and butter or supply and demand. It's the psychology of why things occur. Like a chancellor in Germany may say a statement of this, that, or the other, and you'll watch their currency drop. Or they have a positive statement and you see something move up. But it's not about what the consumers want. It's about the information. And so now, as you fast forward to where we're at now, so much misinformation, the study of behavioral economics is, you see it every single day around you. So that moved me from wanting to be a physician and an orthopedist to, hey, this is suited better for me. I liked building things. I liked doing that. But the kid dying changed my mind immediately. And so I was like, I want to still help people, and and I'm good with the money. What can I do? And so it was really a hybrid kind of degree back then. Now you can find behavioral economics all over the place. MIT has it, Caltech has it. You can get it at Washington. It was interesting. And so for me, that life event changed the course and trajectory of which way I was going to go. And that was like I was 22 when that happened.
And then that story reinforces this whole, again, if you're not living life and you're just on your phone, right, you're not going to have those experiences.
No.
If you're living in your mom's basement, because there's a guy, there's a guy at the sauna. He's like, I hope you're not recording me, because we joke about it, because I've asked him to do a podcast with me. So he'll open up with me in the sauna, but then he's like, it's not going to the podcast because we're not going to do one. But anyways, he has a son, an adult son that's 30, that's living in his house. No job, literally no purpose, no vision, no goals. Like all the things that we've talked about, how to stack yourself to be successful, he's not doing any of those. And it's like, well, you have to go live life in order to know what it is you are trying to do or not do, right? And so, and I think a lot of, they're looking at young people today. I'm a guy, so I look at that more. But I just try to learn about the plight of women as well. But with young men, it's like, okay, if you're depressed, you're sad, and you have all these L's in your life, well, let's change some of those behaviors and let's start actually living life. Let's get out there. Because like the guy told me, his son will stay in his room for days. For days. And I was like, does he have social interaction with people in real life? No, it's all online. And so you're missing out on those experiences. And yeah, it's sad.
That affects you more than one thinks, right? Because social interaction is extremely important for a couple of reasons. One, I think people like to be with people for the most part.
I mean, we're humans. It's built into us.
Yes, and to be social is great. And to be social, it allows you to not be lonely. because loneliness is a huge, huge factor in depression. When I was depressed after sports, it was because I had seen everything that I had worked hard for
Right.
pulled away
There was
from
a
me.
reason, like,
Yeah. And
but
so I didn't know how to deal with that at that age. And my parents didn't know how to deal with it at that age. But I didn't stay in my room.
you didn't have Facebook, so that wasn't an option.
And even today I don't even use Facebook because I got turned off on it and when it first came out.
Yeah.
But it was, I would go out and I would, I'd get on my bicycle or I'd go ride my motorcycle. Man, it was in the dirt. I never rode on the street. I went fishing. I'd go golfing. And it just was like, I got to pull out of this. And really when that finally ended was unfortunately, when that kid passed away.
Yeah. And I've been listening to therapy books lately, and one guy calls that version of you died.
Mm-hmm.
And so that depression was you mourning that loss.
Yep.
And now you had to become a new version of you. And that happened. So there's a natural point of like, if my whole identity is in one thing and I lose that, then it's like, oh, I have to bury that version of myself so I can become a new version. So it would make sense that you went through that. And now for some people, if you have the skills, you can go through that faster. For other people, they stay in that.
Yes.
Right. And that's the thing I try to teach my kids. It's like my older one is very emotional. And as a father, I can say, don't be emotional, or I can say, hey, that emotion is good, but let me give you some tools so you can work through that. Because like you said, you are going to lose games, you are going to miss shots. And I like the fact that you're emotional. He's way more emotional than I am, which is great, but just make sure that emotion doesn't carry over for more than it needs to.
Yeah. It's keeping it in check.
Yeah.
It's hard to do.
Yeah, but if you can
do it, you become a superstar.
If you can learn those skills at a young age,
yeah.
But you don't want to, like, the other thing, you can get to the point where you're delusional.
Yes.
And so sometimes they'll listen to some of my podcasts. They're like, why do you talk about it so much? It's like, because it's my life. And so my younger son, he's to the point where sometimes you can be too confident and you become delusional. And it's like, dude, you really think that? And it's like, yeah. So it's that fine line of like, yes, you want to be confident, but you also don't want to become so delusional that it's like, dude, like you have to have some kind of reality there.
Yes. And I've seen that with kids in sports too. And I've seen it a lot.
But one of my close friends, he has 4 boys as well. And we talk, cause he plays with us. So he's the one that played Division II basketball. And it's like, would you rather your child be timid or overly confident? And it's like, I'd probably want them to be overly confident because you can work that down, versus if they're timid, I think that's a harder battle to be like, boost their confidence.
Yeah, I think it is. And I would agree with when a kid is overconfident in sports, you have to, and they're good, but overconfident.
Yeah.
Right? I can hit every ball, make every shot.
Yeah.
That's when you say, okay, let me let you play against this team.
Right.
And all of a sudden that confidence gets shaken a little bit.
Right. Because life will
humble you.
Yes. So I don't have to worry about it too much. Because it's like life will just you'll realize, oh, there are kids just better than me.
Yes.
So that's cool. I mean, people, as I talk to young people and as I talk to older people, young people kind of get paralyzed with life and the future and the unknown, and they're all depressed. And it's like, well, when I talk to older guys and I ask them about that phase of life, they went through similar experiences, if not worse, and they somehow got through it. So there is a way through it. But what I'm finding, the common theme is you still have to take that next step.
Yes. And so there's some generational things that I've seen in my lifetime. And I'll pull it back to sports, and not that my life isn't revolved around that, but this is where I've seen a separation of generations. As a young kid coming up all the way through high school, the first, second, and third place teams got trophies. Anybody else got a participation certificate. Now, and even when my son, who's 27, played Little League, every kid got a trophy.
Yeah.
Every single kid. First place team to last place team. The difference was the size of the trophy. And I think that's building a false expectation for kids, because later in life they're always looking for their trophy. It's like, look, you just performed average. That's not bad, but it's not deserving of any award or accolade.
Showing up doesn't mean you win.
Yeah. And so that's what all of a sudden a generation was trained. Show up. You don't have to be good. And you're still going to get this trophy at the end of the year. A lot of parents disagreed with me on that. But I think it created somewhat of a generation where people just expected things handed to them. And I think it also built some generations that felt that they needed to be treated softer, and that emotions come more into play and more business now than I've ever seen it in my entire lifetime. And there is a sense of entitlement with certain generations of individuals. And as I try to study the behavior of this, it seems like it all comes down to how they were shaped by the society around them as they were growing up. If they were in sports where they were allowed to, everybody gets a trophy, then these people start to become expectant of that. And at times, many of those aren't thick-skinned. And I'm not saying that you should tolerate bad behavior in a work environment, but life's not easy, and you got to work and you have to grind to get to where you want. No matter whether you have a purpose or not, someone just doesn't go, here's some money, there you go. How's that?
Right.
So you got to work for it. And I think we're seeing some of these things play out in the workplace now, where people feel entitled. I should be getting this. I should be getting that. I'm like, well, what are you doing to motivate us to put you in that position?
Right.
When you just show up, so I don't want to say that that's because of Little League handing out trophies, but it's a mentality that I've seen over a generation or two. I don't see it with kind of the 10 to 15-year-olds right now, because I see there's like this resurgence of some kids going back to play.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that, because there's a dad that I was hanging out with recently, and we were talking about how these 15 to 25-year-olds have this certain mentality. And I'm like, well, I'm hoping the generation that's above them, that's having kids my age, that they're seeing that and they're like, okay, we need to go back to, I think we overcorrected in this one area. Mm-hmm. And now we need to make sure our kids actually, so it's, we didn't have that conversation, but we're kind of agreeing to that, where there was a decade, maybe a little longer, of kids that are now young adults that are employees aren't really enjoying.
Yeah. And, fortunately, my son, 27, my daughter's 30. I feel they had a really good upbringing, but with my son, I can see him already, because he actually earned his trophies. He was always on a first place or second place team. So he was always getting this. He'd be selected to the All-Stars. And so he understands this work ethic. And when I talk to him now, as they're thinking about having kids, we talk about, so as a dad, what did you like? For me, he goes, well, you were always a goofball, but yet we always had these things we had to do. You never cared how we got them done. You just cared that we got them done. Mm-hmm. And if we didn't get them done, we had consequences. We didn't get to go do this. We got this, taken away. We got this. And it was like, You created a discipline in which we had a choice in life to do it how our chores how we saw fit, but as long as we got it done. You gave us a deadline, so we learned to hit deadlines. And Nick says to me, "Well, Dad, one thing that you taught me was that in sports to excel, you got to grind, and never to expect that you're getting a trophy, that you put in the work, and what happens happens." And so I know we both feel the same way, that you put in the hard work, and that generally will bring you success. And I think with my son, he's looking at his generation and then going, well, when I have kids, I don't want them to get a trophy if they finish last. I don't want them to do that. I want them to play. And I think we will see a shift, because life is cycles, right? It's always shifting. A generation or two will kind of follow the same path. The generation that the second generation has, no way do I want to do what you did.
Yeah.
I want to do it different. And then we have this new, I don't know, I don't want to call it I think it's a barrier. And those are cell phones. And
No, it's a real issue. And there's people, when the people with the most money are the people making these products.
yes.
So when they come up with data, they're going to say it's good for you. But when you have independent researchers coming out with data, they're saying elsewise. So as the parent or as the consumer or as just an adult, whose data are you going to trust? You're going to trust the data coming from the guys who make the product? Or are you going to trust the data from the people that are like, nah, they're trying to say you should not really have a phone before 16 because you're not emotionally and mentally, there's just so many areas that you're not ready for. And I can even see that in my own kids. When I was growing up, I had very limited music choices. I just grew up in a very religious home, neither bad or good. That's just how it was. So with my kids, they don't go out and listen to Eminem, but I do give them liberty to listen to certain types of music that I definitely didn't have access to. And so there was this one artist who wasn't necessarily making bad music, but it was rap. And rap, depending on how it goes, can affect you. And what's interesting, over that 2 weeks that we let him listen to that music, and there's no swear words, it was just more like, the guy was just talking about like rapping about basketball being a winner, which was fine. But I noticed that changes behavior in just those 2 weeks. And so as the parent, we're like, okay, he cannot listen to that right now. Not because I'm saying the artist is bad or the music is necessarily bad, but he just isn't emotionally adept to like understand that, because that became like his attitude towards us wasn't great. We just saw how it negatively affected him. And just that 2 weeks, they were like, all right, you cannot listen to that music anymore because it negatively affects you as a person. And since he stopped listening, his demeanor has gotten a lot better. He went back to his just happier self before. So it was just interesting that 2 weeks of letting him listen to that music that wasn't inherently evil or bad. He just didn't have the emotional capabilities to like emotionally regulate that.
It's interesting that you bring that up, because I use certain types of music to bring about different motivations, internal motivations for me.
Yeah.
So if I'm going to the gym, it's fast,
Right.
hard driving action music. When I'm working on reports, I have classical music playing because I have it low, and somehow the classical music, because music is so mathematical,
Right.
it really, I can focus and concentrate. Can't listen to talk radio or any kind of vocalization that's just the spoken word. I can have baseball on in the background because I hear more of the cheers than I hear anything else. And music choice is very important, and not to call out rap, but there's been some rap artists that have now and in the past have negative messages about police,
Right.
about women.
My kids don't listen to that stuff. But.
No, but I mean, it's you're right. It changes one's personality and affects them. And I know that I put on this particular music if I put on the music I listen for the gym before I go play a round of golf, I cannot play a round of golf
Yeah, it'd be
because
too
I'm
aggressive.
so wound up and too
Yeah.
aggressive, and it's not good. So I'm glad that you realize that for kids, because music is used in movies and in everything else to shape one's perception of what's going on or how
Yeah, like
you're
I don't watch horror
identifying.
movies, but if you mute a horror movie, it's not as scary because you don't have the tense music.
That's right. That's right.
But so I think what what was I going to say about we'll go back into you getting out of your depression, you're living life, and now you're mid 20s. You realize, and what's cool is like you try different things and you realize, hey, like it's okay to try something. You were like, hey, I'm becoming this doctor. Oh, that didn't work out. That's life, right? You try, sometimes you try and it doesn't work out. Doesn't mean you're a failure. You're already used to failure because you're like in sports, you fail a lot. So for you, it wasn't the end of the world. It was like, okay, let me try something else. So you got your degree, then what?
Well, it's interesting because I didn't know what I wanted to do at that point. So,
Which is a common theme for people.
yeah, and my sister worked in the auto industry, and she says, "Oh, I can help get you a job." I go, "I'm not going to be a car salesman." She goes, "No, I'll get you into the service department." I go, "I don't know how to work on cars." She goes, "I can get you on at a Porsche dealer." And I was like, "Okay." So I went in,
Were you
and
like 25-ish at this point?
no, I was probably still 22, 23. And then um, I liked it. And I was like telling people their problems and, kind of giving a diagnosis that the mechanic would tell me, and I'd report it to the consumer, tell them how
So
much
that's
it
super
was.
interesting. You didn't actually know cars, but you were the guy that was
I was the one that would take the information the mechanic had, and then I would take it down and go, okay, I don't understand any of this stuff. So I would go to the manuals and I would kind of read what it is. And one of the mechanics, he was like, "Do you know anything about cars?" And I was like, "Hey, I can change a
you're
tire.
like that's the flex capacitor.
Yeah." And I'm like, I know this much. And he goes, "Let me help you." So he was the shop foreman too. So he told all the mechanics that you should write down what the major repairs are first, and then what should be done second, and then what they could put off till later. And I was like, oh, I understand this. This is the behavioral part of the economics that I got to talk to these people. So I did that and learned that really well, and then was promoted through the ranks and became the youngest parts and service director in Porsche's history, and was like, yeah, this is good, but people don't like anybody in the car business.
Correct.
It's even if you are a good individual and you're trying to run a good shop and you're trying to do all this, you go into it with people hating you right
There's
off
already
the bat.
friction.
Yeah. And I'm like, this is stupid. Really stupid. So at
How
the
long did you
same
do
time,
that for?
20 years.
You did that for 20 years?
20 years. It was good money.
So this isn't you weren't even an intern at this point.
No, no, no. I got in insurance late in life.
Okay. So I have a few questions to ask you on the car part. I didn't know that about you. Um you're mentioning, and maybe you were going to do this later, but like as a consumer, we want to go trust the person that's going
Yeah.
to be helping us. But you, as the person that has the knowledge, can now manipulate that information.
Very easy.
And so that's why there's some friction. Not some, there's a lot of friction because it's like I had a personal experience where I wanted to help the local shop right next to my house. I could have gone to like a big store, but I was like, I'll go to this guy. He can change my oil. So I go there, change my oil. He comes back out. He's like, you need this, this, and this. So I was like, okay, let me think about it. I call up my father-in-law, who actually is a mechanic, and I was like, hey, they're saying this, this, and this is bad. And he's like, hey, I'll come by and I'll do it for you. And it was like, I think I need new brakes, all that, everything involved with the brakes. So I go to him, he does it. Great, no problem. So I go back next time to get my oil change. The guy comes up to me and he's like, you need to get this, this, and this, and you need new brakes. And I looked at him and I said, did you even look at it? He's like, what do you mean? I was like, did you even look at them? And he's like, well, based on your old report, it said you need new brakes. I was like, you didn't even look at it. Imagine if I was just some young girl and I'm here supposed to trust you. And I would have said yes, even though I knew I already had new brakes. And so I never went back there. But it's like, as a consumer, we want to trust you. But when, so I'm sure, how did you deal with that? Like with the ethics of like that, but also, like you said, there are things that could be done and there are things that don't need to be done. There could always be something done on the car. So how do you draw that line to be like, hey, this could be done, this doesn't need to be done?
Earlier, and I'll answer this in a long about way.
That's fine.
Earlier, I spoke about starting with the end in mind, right?
Yeah.
So when a mechanic gives you a list and there's need to do now, because this is the problem you came in for, and this is what it needs. And by the way, you got treads, the cables are showing on your tires. You need tires. That's a need to do now. You got 30% left on your brakes. We need to check them the next time you come in for an oil change. And then, some things that you could do over the course of the next couple of months is maybe, flush your brake fluid or, service your transmission and do these things. So let's get this done today. Let's set an appointment for a month or two down the road to get this other thing handled. And then when you come in for your 2 oil changes from now, that's when we should do this other stuff. And they're like, okay, great. I can budget for this. I can do that. It's within my budget. Because, it's easy for someone to go, yeah, it's $5,000 for everything that you need.
Yeah.
And it's not $5,000 for everything they need. It's $5,000 for what you want to sell them.
Right.
Right. And so
that's why there's friction, because it's like, I can't trust you.
And so I was getting these really high ratings because every consumer would rate the repairs and the person that helped them with their car, not the mechanic. That would be the repair portion. But they actually rated my personal performance and how I performed for them and how I explain things and how I set them up and how I save them money, or sometimes they got to spend money.
Did you make commission on each? Is that why they try to upsell? Like, what's the incentive for that?
So you're paid a base salary and then you get a percentage of the parts and labor.
Yeah. And so that's where and you understand this, incentives, right? That's where there's that disconnect, because the guy, I'm the client, you're the sales guy. There's always going to be some friction there because you're making commission off of me needing work done.
Yeah.
And so that's tough, because how do I know that guy isn't just thinking about his commission? Because I'm all about people making money. Like, I work commission now. So I'm not anti-commission or whatever, but it's just like, how do I know that guy has my best interest at heart? Because he can just jack up that bill, because guess what? He's going to make more money. So is it up to that individual to have that moral?
So, yeah. Yes.
Because there's no regulation on that.
And no, but a lot of dealers will self-regulate. They'll look at overzealous service advisors, overzealous mechanics. They don't last long unless the shop has adopted that mentality.
And you're hoping the reviews kind of catch that, because I know the car industry is big on reviews.
Yes. And so for working in that premise, I didn't realize that I was setting myself up later for life. And I just, was looking at this in the auto industry, and I was like, there's no other place for me to go. I've reached the pinnacle of my career as a parts and service director.
It's long hours too, isn't it?
Yeah, it's usually like 7 a.m. to 6 p.m.
Yeah, it's long hours. So you do that for 20 years.
Yeah. But I pulled out of the service drive and into management because they recognized my skills.
And you were with Porsche the whole time?
No, from Porsche, I actually went to Toyota. And I went to Toyota so happily because I went to the largest Toyota dealership in the world, which was in Southern California. And we converted a Sears, the old Sears store.
Is it true that dealerships make more money on service than they do on the sales?
Yes. Yeah. Sales sells the first car, service sells the rest. And if the service department is run by someone who has good moral ethics, you'll have a good moral service advisor team.
Yeah, but you as a consumer have no idea.
You have no idea.
You're just going in there. It's just like when you go to hospital, you're hoping that doctor, and there's usually more trust there because they're like, what is it? Like the doctor's just like, we'll get you a new kidney, get you a new heart. They're like, hey, we got to just take care of this thing. But with the car, it's like, I mean, this is a whole other thing about cars. But after my first 2 used cars, I only drive new cars now because I just have zero trust on even the manufacturer and how long the car will last. But then B, when I had to go through fixing those cars, it was just like when I bought my first Volkswagen, I somehow went to a dealership that was actually good. And the guy sat down with me and he was like, look, there's a lot of things you can do to this car, but here's what you need to do to keep it working for the next 1 or 2 years. I could make you do all this stuff. And so after that whole experience, like he was actually trustworthy because I was like, okay. But now like I only keep my cars for 3 or 4 years because I never want to have to like worry about maintenance. That's just my personal.
Yeah. And so, was always a tough road because as a parts and service director, you're totally responsible for everything in the back end of the store. And, there were many times where I had to terminate a service advisor for exactly what we're talking about. And there were times where I had to terminate a mechanic because of gouging, and more importantly, when they didn't know what they were doing on the cars and however they got in to be a mechanic, I have no idea, especially on, $100,000 car.
Yeah.
And that was way back then. It was $100,000. And your clients, there weren't that many doctors that we had. The doctors were buying the, the Audis or the Mercedes. We had more attorneys because the attorneys had to go work downtown LA or in Santa Monica where parking is very bad. And they brought their little Porsches. Mm-hmm. But you're talking with someone that could really bring disruption to your dealership or yourself if you gave them poor satisfaction, and they let you know, right? And I think that industry made my skin thicker. It made me understand in a very hostile environment. And when I say hostile, it's because the consumer and the dealerships work together, but they don't like working together.
Yeah, there's so much friction there.
Yes.
So much.
And it's so negative coming in.
Yeah.
And so with that said, I learned quite a bit. And I got to the point where I was like, I've got enough money. I'm done. And, at that point, I got married when I was 25, working through all that. And about when I was 40, I ended up getting divorced. And
you want to talk about that at all?
Yeah, we'll talk about that. And so I get divorced. My ex and I we got married in our early 20s. I think we got to the point where we were with each other, but going different directions and always arguing because we didn't know who each other were because we were so young when we first got together. She was 19 and when we met, and I was 23. And which also helped me pull out of my depression. But with that, afterwards, I'd put a bunch of money away, and I was like, I don't want to do this car business anymore.
What wears you down?
And it was so mental. And, I would, as the parts and service director, I'd get to work at 6 a.m. and I would leave 4:30, 5 o'clock. I finally had a decent work schedule when I
Yeah.
was in charge of everything. And I just said, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. There's no satisfaction. I am not living my life's purpose. And so I meet a guy that I played against in high school, and he was a pitcher for the Dodgers, and his son and my son were best friends. And so we started talking, and we started talking about our baseball, and he's like, so why aren't you out coaching anymore? And I go, well, I'm doing Little League. And he goes, no, 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 no. Why aren't you out there? He goes, you're one of the best catchers around. Why aren't you out teaching that? And so I started doing baseball camps during the summer. And that's all I did. I had worked the summer doing baseball camps.
So you quit the car. You completely quit.
Yeah, just quit. And I went into baseball camps and created my own. I would run about 40 kids per week because the camp was a week long. It was $300 a week per kid, and I did it for 7 weeks. And I was like, wow, that's pretty good. Then I would invest that, and then I would do private catching lessons. And then a kid down the street from me, massive kid, the 6'4", could throw 90, and he's like, I need someone to catch me. And I here I am, like, okay, put on all my gear, and I'm like, oh man, okay, we're gonna find somebody else to catch you, but I'll help you, because as a catcher you can help a pitcher because you're receiving the ball, you see the flight coming in, you watch their hand motion. And so I was doing that. I was doing really well.
What decade was this when you quit?
So that I was 40, so 42 actually. So 80s. Yeah, 80s. It was in the 80s. And all of a sudden, here's this opportunity, and I'm doing all of this, and I got an opportunity because I had created was a security piece that could help track cars. And I found something that was coming off a patent, and I was like, oh, hey, we could do this. And I created a consulting firm, and I kind of worked with different carriers and different.
Like LoJack or something like that?
Yeah, very much like that. And the SBA was doing an international business program. And they reached out to me. They're like, hey, we need this in our class. And can you do that? And we'll fly you to different parts of the world, and we'll help you create this, because it was the exports they were trying to get into different countries. And so they flew me to Ireland, England, Spain, Australia. And I was looking at all of these high-end guys that wanted to utilize products to help either track their cattle, track their machinery. I went into India, to track shipments of textiles. And I was looking at this, and it was the World Bank was going to help fund some of these things. But I needed $55 million to do all that. And everybody was like, no, you don't have enough experience in the business. Your business plan's great, but nobody wants to give the money. So I wasn't worried about that. I was still doing all of my baseball camps. And I was like, this is fun, but I want to do something different. And my dad passes away. And he passes away. I'm looking at all of the insurance policies that he had. He had 11 insurance policies. And I was like, oh man, this is crazy. And I started looking at each one. accidental death, accidental death. He died of a heart attack. That's not an accident. And so out of these 11, 3 of them were whole life policies, small, and one was a burial policy. I'm like, this is crazy. And I started looking and I'm going, same agent, same agent, same agent, same agent. I'm like, this is crazy. I look up the agent. The agent was arrested, put in prison, and died in prison because he was fraudulently putting policies on people. And I was like, man, how'd this happen to my dad? My dad's a smart guy. Why? So I started talking to my mom. She goes, well, your dad was, had some heart issues, and he was trying to make sure that if anything happened to him, that I had money, meaning my mom. And I was like, this is crazy. This is whoever is an advocate for a senior. Who advocates for these people? And I started looking up, because back then I could go online. There was a computer, and I went online, and how do I help seniors? And then this thing came up about insurance. And I was like, and started looking at all of
You're in your 40s at this point.
Yeah, I'm in my 40s.
How long did you do that baseball thing for?
5 summers.
Mm-hmm. And then the rest of the year when you weren't doing that, you were
Playing golf.
So you made enough money and you were single so that you could you were kind of enjoying, you took like a mini retirement.
Yeah.
Sounds like. Because you worked really hard for 20 plus years.
And I consulted with businesses on and off, probably 2 or 3 consultant jobs a month. I'd bring in 5 to 10 grand just for that. But it wasn't fulfilling, and I wasn't doing anything that I liked to do. I was making money. And there's nothing wrong with making money, but that was the purpose. I was putting money in my pocket.
Right.
And so, my dad passes, and I'm like, wow, I got to do something about this. And I started talking to folks, and I'm like, I'll go to this meeting. I get a call, and I go to a meeting, and it's really a cattle call for people to become life insurance agents.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, no, I'm not doing this.
One of those pyramid ones or
actually? Yeah. And I know it was a real insurance company, but, insurance is kind of a pyramid scheme, except it's legal.
Yeah, depending on, I don't know if we want to say names, but maybe we won't say them.
No, I think the betterment is that I looked at that and I went, so where is the money in this? And where is the help for the consumer in this? And a buddy of mine was like, hey, go to this company and work for them for a year to understand the process. They'll pay you, they're good, they're reputable. I'm like, great. So my first year in the business,
Did you have to go get your life insurance license?
I had to get my life and health license.
And this is all in the state of California?
All in California. And I look and I understand what I'm doing. I'm doing it really well because it's like I get to go talk to people. It's just like being in the service department. Well, you want this?
What kind of policies were you selling back then?
Term life and health insurance. And it was ancillary health insurance. So like a critical illness type insurance.
Just so you know, I actually had my life insurance at one point, so I'm somewhat knowledgeable.
Yeah, so it was more of the critical illness and hospital indemnity type plans. Mm-hmm. And I made $1 Million Roundtable my first year. And
where were you getting the clients?
We got leads.
So this company was giving you leads.
Yeah,
that's half the battle. And
yeah, they were giving leads, and I called. Mm-hmm. I picked up the phone and called. And then they when I made $1 Million Roundtable, before I went to the event, they promoted me to a branch manager. They're like, oh, cool. I'll do that. And I had a team, and I knew how to run a team, and the guys were successful. And then I went to the meeting, and I'm sitting at this table with a CEO, the CFO, and a bunch of decorated managers. And he was asking the opinion of all of us, what we needed to do to make the business better. And I said, I really think one thing that we could do better is we have so much turnover. We could work on, better retention of our agents. And he looked at me and he goes, you don't get it. And I was like, what do you mean I don't get it? He goes, every time someone leaves, that policy, that agent doesn't get paid on it anymore. The consumer keeps paying and we get the money.
Yeah, so they kind of want.
So we're okay with agents leaving and getting new bodies in. That's your job, to recruit and bring people in. And I'm like, nope. When I get out of Las Vegas, I'm quitting when I get back. And
because he was a FMO, or the life insurance company was saying that, or the FMO?
yeah, the life insurance company. The life insurance company.
So they actually are okay with agents. Because from my understanding, and you can correct me, you have life insurance companies, right? And then you have FMOs.
Which is field marketing organization.
Yep. And then you have the agents.
Yep.
And so the meeting you were at was with an FMO or the life insurance company?
It was with the CEO of the life insurance company.
Okay. So you went to this meeting and they're like, we actually don't need that agent to stay any longer?
There was no FMOs in our channel.
Oh, there was no FMO.
Everybody was direct.
Oh, okay. You were direct. Okay.
Yeah. And so they were happy with that, because then all the revenue goes back to the house. And the only one that gets a piece of the revenue from that is me as the branch manager. I'm like, this is dirty money. Mm-hmm. I don't like it.
So your own moral ethics, that's kind of what I'm trying to get at is I did want to go back to the car thing, but we're now kind of down here. But it's more like, how does the consumer know that the person they're interacting with is ethical?
They don't know. They really don't know. And so that's one of the things that was my driving force of having this conversation, saying we need to work on retention. The better retention we have with our people, the better they will do. And he didn't want any part of that. And so, I left and was like, you know what, I'm going to take a month off. And I saw an ad, because the people put ads in newspapers still back then. There's an ad in the paper, and I'm like, I don't want to do this. And I get a phone call from this gentleman who said he got my name from a friend of mine in the insurance business, and that he should talk to me about running their insurance division. And I was like, oh, yeah, sure. You're right. So I go meet the gentleman, and I meet him at the bank, because it was a Korean bank in Southern California who had an insurance division, and they wanted someone to run the insurance division. And they're like, we want you to do it. And I was like, all right, I can do that. Well, we're going to have operations in India and the Philippines with call centers. And we're going to have one in the City of Industry, and we're going to have one in Irvine. And you got to manage all four of them. And I was like, all right. And they're like, well, you'll have a company card. You'll be able to travel when you need to travel. When you go to the Philippines, you'll stay in our compound, and you'll have a driver, and everything will take you. When you go to India, you'll stay in our compound, and you'll have this. Like, okay, well, what about going down to Irvine? I live in the San Gabriel Valley. Well, you have to get there on your own. I'm like, oh, that sucks, because that's an hour and a half each way.
You're worried about that when you have to get on a plane to fly to the...
Yeah, I didn't care. I thought that was going to be fun, right? They're going to go to different countries and experience life. And then, we did that. I did that for several years. And the mortgage business and the real estate business crashed in the 80s. And the first thing that a homeowner is going to do, because we were selling term life to people for their mortgage insurance.
Right.
And the first thing they do is like,
cut their term.
Yep, I'm cutting my term. And we had 75% attrition rate in the first 2 months of the mortgage meltdown, the real estate meltdown. And because I had my license, I started looking for different avenues for our agency to do. And I came across Medicare and through one of my agents. And she goes, well, I moonlight in Medicare, and this is how much we make, and this is what I do. And if you want me to teach you, I'll teach you. So she was teaching me a few things. I went, oh, this is so easy.
So for me and the listener, give us a short version of what Medicare is.
So Medicare,
Because someone young probably doesn't know.
so Medicare is a federal program that when one turns 65, they can get a Medicare from the federal government by enacting their Part A, which is hospitalization, and Part B, which is all their doctor visits. And you can get health care from the government. That's called a Medicare. It's called Original Medicare. And it's kind of like a group health insurance plan where you have Medicare pays 80% and the consumer pays 20%. And that 20% has no ceiling, though. It's whatever it is. It's 20% of a million, 20% of a dollar.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it breaks down. And I'm like, wow. But how do I sell that? She goes, no, you don't sell that. There's Medicare supplements that you partner with that plan that will help pay for that 20%. Or you can go to a Medicare Advantage plan that's like an HMO and all of this. And I was like, wow, that's a lot to know. But Medicare was easy to understand. It was all the other facets. And I learned it really quick. And my first client that I roll out to is in Bel Air, California. And I'm like, what am I going to sell this person that lives in Bel Air? They must be loaded. And it's my first appointment. Nobody's going out with me, my first appointment. And I roll up into this mansion of a house. And woman had just turned 65 or turning 65 and welcomes me in the house and takes me down to her office where we're going to have the discussion, and I see everything around me is insurance. And she was a C-level executive at Allstate who didn't have Medicare supplements. And I'm like, oh man, what a heck of a place to start my first enrollment. And so I'm getting stuff out, and she goes, I know all of this. Just tell me which one I should be doing. I go, well, I can't really tell you. You have to select what you want. I go, your price, does price matter to you? She goes, no, I want the top plan because I want to pay as little or zero out of pocket. Is this your first sale? That's how she said that to me. And I went, yes. She goes, okay, I'm going to help you. I like you. And you have a confidence about you. But there was something that let me know this was your first sale. And I was looking around the room and I go, is it because I was enamored on all of your awards and accolades? And she goes, yeah, I think so. I think so. And she goes, have you had any yet? I go, well, I've reached $1 Million Roundtable, my first year in insurance. And she goes, okay, what do you want to sell me? I go, I don't want to sell you anything. Here's the options. What do you want to do? She goes, I'm doing this. You're going to have a great career. I walked out of the house, and I have to tell you, I was so parched. I didn't have water with me. So I, went to, there's a Nordstrom's around the corner and paid $10 for a bottle of water. Right. And I was like, wow, I like this. And I did it for probably another year in that realm of Medicare supplements mostly.
Were you still running that office or that kind of...
I was running the office, but we were whittling down.
Yeah, because it just wasn't all...
There wasn't a lot to do. So I didn't have to go in very often.
You weren't traveling to the Philippines?
No. And
so what were they selling in those other countries? Same policies?
Yeah, term life. And a lot of our follow-up work where we need this from you, we need that from you. Either the Philippines or India would handle all of the back office support stuff.
Were they actually selling products in those countries, or were they more helping off the office stuff? Like
They were
you-
helping here onshore, here in the U.S.
so they were a support team, not actual
Right.
products.
There were 2 agents there, but they couldn't transact across the water. Right. They couldn't do that. So, it was interesting because I learned quite a bit. And my years in the automotive field, in the back end of the service, really did shape how I was dealing with clients. The only difference, these clients weren't mad. They weren't like, how much are you gonna charge me this time? Because the prices were the prices for the plans, and their health determined whether they needed to be underwritten or charged a higher price. That's not my fault, right? And I did okay to the point where I didn't hit $1 million round table, but
Where are you getting the leads again?
no leads. So my mom was third vice president of a senior center. My mom was my lead generator.
So you paid her a little on the back end.
What I did for my mom, because she had beautiful handwriting, I would have her and some of her lady friends. I would do mailers, and I would do things, and they were all handwritten, and I would pay these women for doing it. And I was like, okay, I'm doing really well here, and I like this, but it's all me. It's all on me every day. And I'm like,
Right.
this is like being back playing sports where I got to grind every
Right.
single day. And it was fun, but the miles on my cars were just going through the roof. And I get a phone call after about 2.5 years doing this. I get a phone call from United Healthcare. And they're like, hey, we're looking for someone just like you, and we would like to interview you. And I'm like, yeah, sure. Who is this? Which friend of mine? I go, if you're really United Healthcare, you'll have a phone number for me to call back on. She starts laughing, and she goes, someone must have pranked you before, but this really is United Healthcare, and here's my number. Please call me right back. So I did, and I was like, I am so sorry to doubt you. She goes, no. She goes, I appreciate that you had some reservations, because, people call out of the blue all the time. And she goes, we'd like to have you come down for an interview. So I go and I interview, and I was like, okay.
How old are you at this point?
I'm
You-
50, maybe 48 or 49.
Late
That's-
40s, early 50s?
Yeah. And so, gosh, I met the gentleman that I was supposed to be on his team, and he and I just clicked. And
And what was that position?
so it was called an agent manager. And so I had the responsibility of 2,500 agents. So I was the manager to those independent agents.
So United Healthcare has their own agents.
They have, when I started, there was 3 sets of agents. You had employed,
Yep.
you had ICA, which is internal captive agent. They're still independent. And then you had the external distribution channel, which are agents and brokers that are independent. And as an agent manager, you're in charge of all 3 groups. And
How did they find out about you?
I had a resume on Monster that I had forgotten about. And they were looking for someone for the LA office who had experience in all different lines and had final expense experience too, because they were contemplating adding final expense as a possible line. And so I go to my interview, I hit it off with the guy, and he's like, I need you to meet my peer. Can you stick around for a while? I'm like, sure. So he comes back from lunch, and he's an Division II referee and does a lot of baseball. And he's like, I know you. I go, how do you know me? He goes, I remember you from baseball. You don't remember me, but I threw you out of the game. And I went, oh, it's you. And he goes, so you coming to work for us? And I was like, well, I'm still being interviewed. He goes, I didn't ask you that. I asked you if you're coming to work for us. I go, that's my goal. And then from that, I had to come back a week later because the VP of the market was on vacation and I had to sit in front of her for my final interview. And she asked me, so what do you do with agents? How do you manage an agent? I said, well, you got to be good for them, but not good to them. She goes, explain yourself. And I go, when you're good for them, that means that you're educating them, showing them the way, you're doing this thing. When you're good to them, you're enabling them. You're giving them the leads, you're giving them this, and they don't know how to fish for themselves. They don't know how to do this. I go, my entire career in insurance has been, how do you bring in constant activity to make money? And so I went there and with it, like I said earlier, within my first year, I took the whole team on my shoulders and really pushed us up because.
Were you incentivized through commission as well? I'm sure you had a base salary.
So I had a base salary, and then we got a dollar amount per enrollment, whether it was a Medicare Advantage plan or a Medicare supplement or a prescription drug plan.
Who's paying you?
Who paid the?
So with Medicare, is the government paying you for signing them up?
Yes, in the long run. It's an enrollment fee. But that enrollment fee is paid to the insurance company.
Mm-hmm.
And then out of that total dollar amount that they get per member per month, which is usually around $1,000, it's going up. Then that first $1,000 of the first enrollment, the agent gets a piece of that first enrollment and the largest amount because they are the direct line of defense. And then if there is an upline, so to speak, an agency or an FMO that we talked about, then they get a piece of it too. And then what's remaining is for the carrier to take care of care. From months 2 to 12, they're not paying any commissions to anybody. It's all going to them for patient care. Mm-hmm. And so it's a really finely structured pay system that's overseen by the federal government. And there are rules in the payout structure. And in the field of Medicare, what a lot of folks don't know is that if agents do misdeeds, it's not civil, it's criminal. Mm-hmm. And so you have to run a lot of compliance. And that was the interesting thing. I went from my first year as an agent manager to my second year when I got into the Eagles Club. When I graduated from the Eagles Club, they promoted me to sales director. And so I managed half of Los Angeles. So there's 11 million people in LA.
Yeah, it's a lot of people.
And so I was responsible for half of the seniors in LA County. And my team was 2 agent managers. I had 3 inside sales reps. I had 12 captive agents and about 3,500 independent agents. And so my role was to keep everybody moving forward, create training. There's always training from the corporate world, but it's corporate training, product. There's some sales training in this, but it's never directed as your market. Mm-hmm. And everybody's market is different because everybody's market has different consumers. Consumer needs are different in California than Texas, than Utah, than Washington. And, it got really, really intense doing what I was doing because we worked hard from like September to middle of December because the annual enrollment period is October 15th to December 7th for Medicare when people want to switch or change. if they haven't aged in earlier. And so you really take on this whole new realm because now you're dealing with people's lives and you can't sell them anything. And there could be a husband and wife or, two others in a household with two different plans, and it may not be the same insurance company because someone has these drugs and the drugs are better over here on this plan. And so this is where abstract thinking really helped me because it was like, okay, a lot of agents can't put all this together. So they need to have systems and put it together. They need to have some kind of spreadsheet that says, all right, these provider groups, the doctors, take these plans. And you make these matrix that take weeks to build because doctors come in and out of network constantly. And it really, really did involve me with critical thinking as to the behavior of consumers. And consumers, and statistics show, have gravitated away from the Medicare supplements coupled with original Medicare, and they moved to the Medicare Advantage because lower out-of-pocket costs and all of that. And as I'm succeeding, at United, I was being recruited to go work for an FMO, for a field marketing organization. And, they waved some big dollars in front of me, and they wanted me to head up sales for the West region. And I did that for a while. And the one nephew came out from the other state where they're domiciled, and not that they were taking me out of that position. They put him in charge of like the California and that part of the West, that they had just acquired a huge book of business they bought for $2 million in the Pacific Northwest. And my daughter was going to school at University of Oregon. My ex-wife and son had already moved up here. And I was like, well, who's going to run that? And they're like, you are. You need to handle the transition because no one else can handle the transition.
This is with the FMO because you left United.
I left United and I went to the FMO and, worked there for about 3 years. And it was interesting because as the CEO was retiring out, who was younger than me, they had another gentleman that came in and was in charge of all the VPs. And in our market, a particular carrier wasn't going to do well because their benefits were degraded at the time. And they didn't do anything to improve the benefits to make the consumer choice better. And another carrier had better benefits. And I'm like, so what do you want me to do here? Do you want me to push this one that you want me to push that we won't get very many sales? Or do you want me to push revenue where we can get the sales? Because this is consumer demand drives Medicare business. And so he's like, I want you to do this particular plan. And in my head, I'm going, that's steering, which is illegal. So I talked to the CEO and he's like, well, I agree with you that we need to chase revenue, but if he's now your boss, you need to follow his role. And I'm like, I'm done because this is not going to be a good situation for me. And I'm already living up here. I'm like, And so one of my biggest clients up here was like, someday you should work for me or you should be my partner. And after about 4 or 5 months of constant discussion, I left that FMO to come to the FMO that was up here. And it's a really great experience. And so I think it all still boils back to my purpose, which is to help people achieve their personal goals. And I do this through teaching agents how to be better agents and putting work-life balance together with their day-to-day insurance business. And, we went from about they were doing about 1,200 enrollments a year to, I think we're about over 8,000 enrollments a year now.
And how are you getting these leads again?
So I used to run a radio show up here in the Pacific Northwest, and that was a big driver of leads. We would also,
There's an endless amount of people turning 65.
yeah, endless amount of people turning 65, and there's
How do people know at 65 that they should go enroll?
so a lot of times the employer will tell them if they're still working, because right, you don't retire at 65 anymore. You don't pull your Social Security at that point. For some people, it's 66, 67, and older. And so, there's so much advertising on television about Medicare year round.
Yeah, I'm not in my 60s, so I'm just assuming once people get to that age,
When
they're
you
like,
hit
I should
60,
start looking around.
when you hit 60, your mailbox is full of advertisements. When you get to be 64, every day there's something in your mailbox. And
So you have to go out of your way to not think about it.
yeah, you have to go out of your way to not think about it. And then, because we're in 14 states, agents, will come to us and say, well, I need to do this, this, and this, and I don't really want to do any kind of lead program. I don't want to buy leads. In Medicare, you can't cold call anybody. They have to reach out to you. Excuse me. So with that said, it's like, hey, I'm thinking about putting a billboard up on near Poolsbo. Sure, give me a price. Let me know how much it is. And depending on how much it is, I look and run the numbers, and it may be something that I may want to co-op with the agent 50-50. Or I may reach out to one of our partners and say, hey, this guy wants to do an ad for XYZ in your company, and here's the cost. Can you assist? And if you assist, I'll assist. And so leads are generated by new agents. They'll do mailers for people turning 65. They will do events out in the community. We'll go to the Seafair event. We'll farmers markets. The agents get into the weeds with
And you're selling a product that almost has to be sold. So that's where...
Yeah, and it's not even real. I mean, it is sales because they are an insurance agent, but they're paid an enrollment fee.
Right.
They have to tell the consumer they're paid an enrollment fee, and the fee is paid by the government. And when you're an independent agent, you don't care what carrier they're enrolling in unless they're looking at a bad plan for themselves based on their prescriptions and their health needs. There's a lot of business that comes from word of mouth. There's a lot of business that people will respond to ads. But generally, where the agents will get most of their leads is from community events and referrals. And community events could be like someone sitting at a senior center for a couple hours once a week.
I'm assuming senior centers are pretty protective on who they let in.
Because you can't sell anything in a senior center. You can only do educational events.
Yeah.
Which is okay, because if you educate someone really well, they have confidence in you that you know what you're talking about, and then they'll come up, grab your card, and you just say, hey, I can't do anything right now, but if you give me a call, I'll set up an appointment for you.
So maybe we can connect more off camera, because one of my biggest things is I want to meet more people to communicate with. And right now my lead pool is the gym. And eventually I've already interviewed half the people at the gym that I actually want to interview.
Yeah.
And so it's like, all right, where do whole people hang out? Oh, retirement community. So I called one time and they're like, bye. And I was like, yeah, that didn't work out very well. So I'm not trying to sell people anything. I'm just trying to meet people who are willing to share their story. So we can maybe talk about that more often later.
Yeah.
But that's my biggest thing is I just want, again, I'm not selling you a product.
You're looking for content.
Yeah. So we can talk about that later. Just figure out how I can meet people. You're giving them insurance and be like, hey, this guy wants to hear your story. Anyways, but that's really interesting. How, as I hear you talk about your life, different career changes, choices, and, when you were 18, I don't think you could have ever guessed this is where you would be at your current age.
Never in a million
right?
years.
And I think a lot of times with young people, because when they think about the future, it's scary, it's unknown, and that's just part of life, right? And so originally it used to be baseball. That didn't quite work out. And then it was like, oh, I'm going to become this doctor. That didn't quite work out. I'm going to now what accidentally, like, here's another common theme I'm finding in my podcast is a lot of times people, there's an unplanned event or person that you meet that then changes the trajectory of your life.
Mm-hmm.
Me now knowing that, I plan for that. I look for that. Where by continually putting myself out there and talking to strangers, I'm now increasing my odds of that happening.
Right.
Because I know that's like an unwritten law, rule of life is the more you put yourself out there, right? You've heard the saying, you create your own luck, right? And so it's like, oh, I want to go meet people. I want to go have experiences because it can lead to this or this or this. For a lot of people, it accidentally happens, but it only happens maybe once in their life where it's like, no, you can increase the odds of that just by putting yourself out there. But what's interesting about your story was after 20 years in the car industry, whether it's a midlife crisis, whatever it is, you went a totally different route where some people, when they hit that age, they'll look around and like, it's too scary to make a change. So I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. And then the next 20 years is miserable. I think a lot of guys do that.
Mm-hmm.
They'll just stay in that industry and then they just hate the next 20 years of their life
Yep.
waiting to retire. Or you're like, no, I can reinvent myself. And you did. You know, you had a few years where you're kind of trying out different stuff. You had that project that, you know, had you gotten funded, that would have gone a different way.
Yep.
So that's cool. It's cool hearing, like, I hope if a young person listens to this, that there's a lot they'll get out of it. And there's a lot I get out of it is if you continue to live life, continue to put yourself out there, continue to meet people, you can have different experiences, right? You never would have guessed that you were going to be in a position where you could have gone to the Philippines and India, all these different countries. I mean, you had people calling you, setting you up for different positions. And another, you know, theme I hear from your story is a lot of times when people think when you restart, you are restarting, but you're taking your skills with you, right?
Absolutely.
And so you as a 40-year-old insurance agent, you had 20 years of experience of selling versus a 20-year-old life insurance agent. Because I actually tried insurance sales in my early 20s and I failed miserably.
It's hard.
I failed miserably because A, I was young. I didn't really have a good mentor. There's a whole lot of reasons I failed. Had I met someone like you, it probably could have been a different story, right? But you are a 40-year-old agent versus a 20-year-old agent where you had 20 years of actual experience. So anytime you do restart, you're never really restarting from zero because you're bringing that whatever experience you had prior to that thing. But yeah, so just super cool, interesting story, hearing all that. There were questions I was going to ask about the car, but I think we'll just leave it at that as far as, again, how do you know whoever you're interacting with has the morals and ethics? You having sold different types of things as a consumer, how do I know?
You know,
What's a question I can ask to be like, this person has my best interest at heart versus their snake? Because people in the sales industry, people who have to go interact with those people, they just automatically assume this guy's a...
so it's interesting that you asked that because for me, when I go take my car in to get it serviced, they're at an unfair disadvantage because they don't know that I know what goes on. Over the course of the years of that 20 years in the auto industry, I can tell you how every single system works. I can tell you what makes it go. I can do all that. You put a wrench in my hand, I'm not going to fix your car.
funny.
I'm not going to be able to. I can do it, but it'll be the only time you hear me swearing is when I'm trying to work.
Well, they're saying these new cars are so
they're terrible,
complicated that it's...
and
That's why another reason I don't keep cars for a long time.
And I have an antique truck that I play with every once in a while. I'm trying to get it back. It was my dad's truck. And I'm like, you know, first of all, I hate grease. And even when I played sports, I wash my hands in between every inning. I hate having dirty hands. But what I will do to someone when I go to get my car worked on, whether I go to an independent shop or I go to a dealership. I'm like, so when you prepare the report for me, I expect to get a listing of what needs to be done now, what should be looked at here in the near future, and what I should keep my eye out open for maintenance for the rest of the year. If everything you show me is going to be a need to do now, I will not be doing it.
I like that. So for someone listening, say that again.
So when I go to any kind of car repair and tell them what my problem is, or if I'm going in for maintenance,
Oil change. People do that.
oil change, and I'll say, look, I expect you to give me a report back. But when you give me the report, I want it broken down into three ways. Need to do now, stuff we need to do soon. We could do it now, but stuff that needs to be soon, and stuff that can be done over the course of the remainder of this year. Maintenance I should pay attention to, or if you think here that, I could probably wait for another month or two for wiper blades. Well, you know what? Put the wiper blades up on the car right now, but break it down into three for me. And I watch their expression. I watch their facial expression, because what I'm trying to influence on them is, I know how this works. I'm going to tell you how I want you to service me. And I expect this level of service from you. I don't tell them that I'll go away. I won't tell them that I'm not going to do the business with them. I'm waiting for them to come back with the report to see how much I can trust them and if they listen to what I said. And I'm not bashing any auto industry mechanic or advisor, but everybody is paid the same way in most of those industries. You get a base and you get commission. You don't need to hit your commission in a home run on me. I keep my cars in very good order. So when I bring it in, I usually know what's going on. And so I make them handle me the way I want to be handled. And I do that by setting it up from the beginning. Has it always happened that way? About 95% of the time. When I get someone that doesn't prepare it like that, I will say, okay, what's my diagnostic fee? Great. I want my car. And they're like, well, I go, well, because you didn't do exactly what I asked you to do, so I can't trust you to do the work. And I've pulled cars out because of that. And service managers will be like, why did that guy leave? Or I get a phone call, hey, how come you didn't want to get the work done? I will explain it. But you have to tell them to get the results. And I think that's with anyone. You kind of have to set the standard of what you want. And as an individual, I don't think any of us can move down the path of life angry. You have to have an attitude of gratitude, because even if your job sucks, guess what? You're getting paid. You probably have health insurance, and you're paying for your rent, and you're paying for your kids, and you're paying for whatever. And so you're grateful. And if you have that mindset of being grateful and you keep your eyes open, and we talked about how my life changed different directions, my eyes were wide open. And when change came about, I was so grateful for the change, and so grateful for that the transitions happened easily. Because if you don't take advantage of the situation and you let it go by, you'll have a life of shouldas, and you'll shoulda all over yourself. And I think that without being grateful and without having some sense of purpose, your life goes in circles and you don't move ahead. And I have countless friends that are in that whirlpool and they can't get out of it.
Yeah, I'm curious how many of your peers in your 60s have a lot of regrets in their life?
I would say a lot.
Yeah, more than 50.
Yeah, more than 50. My close friend, who was the best man in my wedding, he's a psychologist for Kaiser in Southern California. And we talk about this all the time. And he's like, I love all of my patients, but sometimes I listen to them and it's, it's a woe is me, woe is me, woe is me. And he's like, you always talk about gratitude. And he goes, now I talk about it to these people. Where do you find what are you grateful for in your life right now? And when someone's not grateful for anything, they're always mad. They're going to get that same reception back from people. They're going to get that same reception back. And it happens a lot in the car business. You go in thinking negative, you end up having a negative experience. So what you're expressing out, the world sees. That service advisor sees it. And all of a sudden they jump into that same realm of negativity. Or I've seen it when I've done some ride-alongs with agents to see how they work with clients. And after they do their thing, I'm like, wow, you weren't that nice to this person. You were kind of like, dot, 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 dot. You weren't warm and welcoming. So you need to work on that. Oh, I got the sale. I go, yeah, but are they going to stay with you? Are they going to recommend you? Or are they going to leave when they can find someone that will listen to their needs? And so, I don't know. I've been blessed to have so many different things happen in my life, good and bad. I'm grateful for all of them. I'm still grateful for the opportunity to swing that bat and to be on that field. Didn't turn out the way I wanted, but neither did a lot of things. And so as I look back, I'm like, what are my biggest accomplishments in life to date? And it will be still having family, my kids. My ex and I are very close. We just can't be married, but we're very close. And I'm grateful to be able to have those relationships and relationships from work and to be able to be in a good position. I don't think I would be where I'm at today if I wasn't grateful for everything that I've gone through. Good, bad, and indifferent. Because life has sucked at times. And I go through the grind. I grind through it because you have no choice. The biggest thing I think for anyone is the 4 to 5 inches between the ears, because that's the space you need to control. If you can control the emotion, you can control your thoughts and be in a realm of gratitude, that in and of itself will help the confidence and push you down the road and to help you achieve whatever you want to achieve. For me, it's simple, but it took me a lot of years to figure that out.
Yeah.
A lot of years.
I have a few questions and we'll wrap up. So I'm 35. What advice would you give to a 35-year-old version of yourself that may not necessarily make your life better, but just help avoid some of the pitfalls?
So if you're a 35-year-old male or woman and you have children, play with them. Play with them. Actually play with them. Toss a ball, shoot some hoops, throw a football around. My daughter and I used to go hang out and we'd go bake things together. My wife at the time, she would sleep in late on a Sunday. I'd get my daughter up. We'd go to the golf course and we'd go putt around. And then we'd go to this little coffee shop and I'd pick up at LA Times and she'd get her hot chocolate and create moments. And if you don't have children, you need to create moments for yourself and you need to do some self-awareness. And whether you're meditating, what are you grateful for? And do a T-chart. What are you grateful for and what would you like to improve? And if you can identify what you like to improve, you should be grateful for that you have self-awareness, that you can, make those changes. And I think at 35, you're kind of halfway to retirement, or at least till Medicare. And at 35, you still feel invincible. Like you can do anything and accomplish anything. And if you feel like you still need some help at 35, never be afraid to ask for it. But if you don't have a plan for yourself, and if you don't have a means for earning money and saving some of it, and doing things for other people and taking yourself out as a person that likes to help other people, I think you just kind of waddle through life because you really aren't doing anything. You know, just because you have a high paying job, maybe at a big company like Amazon or Microsoft, that doesn't mean you're succeeding. You know, you have to look at your life's purpose and what you're doing in that. And if your life's purpose only is working and you have no idea of family or even your own parents or whatever, I think as a 35-year-old, you sit at this, the world is still, you still have 60, 70 years ahead of you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to kick out of here till I'm 106 or so. So, you know, I'm no medications, nothing. I'm a little overweight, but I'm fit. And, you know, I outdrive my son with the golf ball. My daughter outputs both of us. But, you know, I think whether you're 35 or 40, 50, you can constantly reinvent yourself. You know, look at some of our politicians. You know, 70s and 80s. That doesn't mean that they should continue or not continue, but it shows that the mind is capable of continual improvement. And if you don't focus on taking care of yourself mentally and physically, it's hard to have, you know, a purpose in life. It's hard to move forward when all you do is complain or all you do is, oh, woe is me, and you don't have any gratitude. And I know I've said that like a broken record, but
Important.
it really is important, and being able to accept things as they come in. And that means when a new opportunity arises, to see it, to realize it, and capitalize on it. That I learned that in sports. I sat sitting for fastball all the time. When I saw the curveball coming in, I was like, oh, okay. After I learned to hit that, I would jack that ball over the fence. You throw me a curveball and you throw it inside of me, it's going over the left field fence. Because you slowed the ball down. I'm sitting fastball and you slowed the ball down and I'm still sitting back. I can still hit a ball today because it's a rote memory.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little harder for me to keep up with a 90-mile-an-hour fastball, but I still hit in the cages in the 80s. And I do that just so that my hand-eye coordination is there. But I like to hang out with the 30 to 40-year-old group and go, come on, let's play. Because I think that there isn't enough aged mentors that will still play with you. I still got my spikes. I'll go put them on. Well, I'm going to go play. Let's go play. You want to play softball? Well, I don't catch anymore. I go to first base. I'll play shortstop too. But
I would agree with that statement a lot because I interact with, I'm proactively trying to interact with older people. I try to interact with my peers. And I mean, there was this one lady I met at the Y. She was in her 60s. And I was like, when's the last time you talked to someone? She was walking around the track. I was like, when's the last time you interact with someone my age? Years, if not decades. And so I want people to, if you want to get outside of yourself, if you want a different perspective on life, don't just talk to your peers. Maybe talk to people a little younger. Talk to people older than you. That does help you ground yourself in where you're currently at. And just, so you're my 32nd guest now. And it's like just over those 32 guests, talking to a lady in her 80s. And my youngest guest was, I think, 30. That's a huge gap, but they have different perspectives on life. And I tell people, talk to as many people and talk, but also try to do things like you said. It's funny what you mentioned about playing with your kids. So this was my evening yesterday. My two boys, we played basketball. We played 2-on-2 basketball for almost an hour. And then my wife took the other two to the Y. And then afterwards, We had to go to Costco, so we all took the boys to Costco, and then my wife dropped off the kids. Then we went and got cookies from Cookie Crumble. Then we came home, and I run Tuesdays, Thursdays, Saturday, and Sundays. So I said, okay, we're gonna go running. So my two boys, they go run with me, and then my two other kids, they ride their bikes. So we went and did 2 miles together, and we come home and had their cookie. So that was our evening, and that's what I try to do, especially in my evenings and weekends, is spend that time with the kids. Other parents, I'm not gonna judge them or whatever, but a lot of other parents, they would rather put their kid in some kind of sports program. And at that age, it's like, dude, just play with the kid. They don't need to, you don't need to pawn them off to all these programs. Just you interact with your child. You had them. Why are you pawning them off? It's just my personal opinion.
I think in some cases, depending on the person's job, like I know some friends that are physicians.
Yeah, I get it. I'm in a good situation where I get to spend lots of time
Yeah,
with my kid.
and so that's one thing that the insurance and real estate agent or real estate worlds get to allow you to do.
Yeah, 1099 worlds.
Yeah. I'm not 1099. All of our agents are 1099. But, it's a lot different because my work and my roles, I build what I need to do for myself during the day. On my calendar, you're on my calendar today from 10 to 1. So that whatever time it took, and I'm focusing on that. And I think what a lot of parents fall into the trap is that hamster wheel of gotta make money, gotta make money, gotta make money. And the kids realize that, but the kids also see when you're not there. They see when they're in come to have a concert and they're playing for the first time in front of their school. They want their parents there. Or kids playing a sport, they want their parents there. They're acting. When the parents and the children have separation at events where it doesn't need to be, unless you're called in an emergency or something, you create separation between you and your family. And that's horrible. Because then when do the kids feel like dad or mom is their rock that they can lean on when they're not ever there? And the way to circumvent that is what you do. It's what I did and I continue to do, is play with them. I don't care if my son's 27 and my daughter's 30. Come on, you want to come over and play? You want to hit some golf balls in my backyard? I got the whole practice facility. You want to play croquet? You want to throw the ball around? You want to go for a walk? You want to go ride bikes? Let's go do something. Because when we start interacting and doing things, there's no talking about this is horrible at work. There's no this is bad. This is bad. We're engaged with each other and we're playing, and all that matters is the play and that we're together. And so I applaud you for doing that with your kids. And I've seen your kids through video play basketball. They're very talented. And I've had a lot of conversations with you at the gym, in the sauna, and here today, that I feel personally that you are setting good examples for them. Parents need to set limits on certain things. I don't know. I know I have my nephew is 40. One of my nephews is 44. And his daughter runs the household. Whatever she wants, they do. Unfortunately, she's a smart kid and she's a straight A student and really nice. But she doesn't go outside and play. She wanted a new headset for her playing video games and a new PlayStation. She gets it. And I'm like, man, your daughter's really athletic. She doesn't need to be in sports, but she needs to go outside and play. And, it's interesting. Gratitude, play, a purpose. I think that's where life, for me, circles around. And I see that you do that a lot with you and your family as well. So, again, I applaud you for doing that.
Yeah, and the older I've gotten, I have my core principles, and it's like, for me, it's faith, family, fitness. and money is not my top priority. I have to make money, but for a lot of people, money becomes that top priority, and then the other things kind of fall apart.
I have
Their
this.
health, their family.
Yeah, I have this interesting concept about money, especially in the world of insurance. And I think it probably plays true to a lot of industry. If you chase the money, you're never going to be happy. If you chase money, you'll never be happy. I like to be in the realm of if I help and service enough people, I'll be rewarded with money. And money will be the scorecard or the scoreboard of how well I'm treating folks and how many people I can treat well. And I think when someone puts themselves in that perspective and you focus on the service, whether you're a salesman or not, it's still service oriented. And if you focus on the service and the consumer, and I don't believe the consumer is right all the time, but I don't believe in getting into a confrontation with them either over that. But if you focus on the service and you focus on doing well for them, you will make more money, and the money is your scorecard of how well you are doing. When you put the money in the forefront, forget it. You'll go broke because all you do is chase the money, and these clients will see it.
Some people, I would agree with you. Obviously, there's nuance to it. Some people won't go broke, but they'll emotionally be broke. Like it comes at a cost, right? You have the high-end narcissist. I mean, to become a billionaire, I'm not saying billionaires are bad, but to become ultra wealthy, it does require generally some form of narcissism. And so, yes, you can make money your primary goal, but once you've achieved it, like, why do billionaires commit suicide? Like, they should literally be the happiest people in the world, but because they made that billion their ultimate desire, once they got it, they weren't happy. So you're right, but you can have quote unquote success with money, but if it is your ultimate goal, you won't find
No, you'll be miserable the whole time because all of a sudden you're not hitting your money goals, and then you're like, oh, I don't have enough money, and you get depressed on that rather than be grateful for the money that you do have and then manage it.
Yeah.
Right? And save it, manage it, and give some of it away. Do something for someone. You know, that was one of the fun things to do in Los Angeles because, homeless is rampant everywhere, right?
I just read Seattle's plan on how to deal with that. Yes, they just came out with the plan last night.
And it's interesting. I encouraged the agents in Southern California, and I encouraged my peers. Like, when you're out and about in the city and you're working with this agent and going to this agency, stop at McDonald's at 11 o'clock and buy 20 or 25 hamburgers. Don't buy fries, just buy hamburgers or cheeseburgers. And then ask them if they'll give you separate bags. And what I was doing for myself was I'd see somebody that'd be homeless and having a sign, hey, could you spare some change? And I would go to my seat and go, hey, you want a hamburger? And I'd hand them a hamburger and drive away, not ask for anything. And I felt it was kind of my part of helping them have some sustenance during the day. I would never give them money because it goes to drugs or alcohol right away. But everybody does need to eat. And it's a feel-good moment. And I did it when nobody is in the car, just me and...
Yeah, now they make YouTube channels about that.
Yeah.
People doing kind acts.
Yeah, but if you're putting it on YouTube, you're doing it to promote yourself.
I know.
I don't need anybody to see me do a kind act.
Yeah.
Because just don't. Why do I want to make that homeless person feel bad with a camera? Oh, here, look at this guy's giving him something.
I thank you for your time. I have one final question. There's lots of other questions I could ask, but my final question to you is, since this podcast is called The Game of Life, If you want to summarize in a sentence, phrase, whatever, what is life to you? So life is dot dot dot.
So for me, life is family, life is fitness, and life is play. I have faith, and my faith it's incorporates every one of those. So I don't put it at the top, I don't put it at the bottom, because I can't do any of this stuff without faith interweaving between all of them. So for me, it's, family, fitness, and play. And that's it. And commit to yourself. If you don't commit to yourself, people do things to please other people constantly. I I got over that really young age, because you can never keep everybody happy. But if you keep yourself happy and you focus on your family, you focus on your fitness, and you play, you'll keep things in perspective. And you wrap that up with gratitude. And that's a longer sentence that you wanted. But that's me, and that's what I feel and try to expose to everybody. Family, fitness, play, and be grateful that you can do all of that.
I know that I said that was going to be my last question, but your answer brought up something else. You know who Patrick Bet-David is?
No.
So he made his money through insurance sales. I listen to a lot. He has a podcast, and one thing, he's extremely wealthy now, several $100 million. But one thing, as he judges, he's built an agency, built all that. Anyways, one thing that when he judges someone or decides whether or not he wants to work with someone, this is a really good test. I don't know how you do in the short term, but he wants to know if that person has something other than themselves to keep them accountable. So with a low religious person, he knows at least whether they're Islam, Christian, whatever, they at least believe in something, that if they wrong someone, that something's going to hold them to that higher power. But he finds that people that don't have something other than themselves holding them accountable, that's a scary person to work with, because who's keeping them accountable if they're not, because they don't believe in a higher power. So I'm trying to figure out, okay, how do I know whatever sales experience I'm going to, whether it's buying a car, getting my car serviced, buying insurance, how could you know right away that that person is being held to something greater than themselves? I don't know the answer.
I don't know.
What tests can you give them? I liked what you said about, hey, when you go, it's kind of like throw out a mini test to see if they fail or pass, right? When you're getting your car serviced, hey, break it down for me in this way. And then if they don't, then maybe I don't want to work with this person. But that thought occurred to me. It's like, not that you judge the person, but just know, is this someone that I can potentially do work with, even with insurance, right? As you got into the insurance world because you saw how scammy or aggressive, or how those aren't the terms I'm looking for, just how unscrupulous someone can be.
Yes.
And so as a consumer, how do I give that person a fair chance without judging them right off the bat?
It's a great question, because people are judgy.
Yeah.
Really judgy. It's easy to kind of set that up for a service advisor, and when you want, with the way I laid that out. The way I would, like, if it's kind of using the car business, if it was a car salesman, less is more for me. I go into a dealership, I'm looking at a car, someone comes up for their up and they want to do whatever. It's like, oh, hey, do you need me to show you around the car? Do you have any questions or anything like that? And if they keep trying to sell you, and I got this over here and I got this over here, to me, that's someone that's trying to push me in a particular direction. And my radar goes up from that. And that's probably years of experience.
Yeah.
And I would be looking more for the person that says, hey, hi, I'm Dan. And, we have these cars here. Used cars are over there. I can help you one-on-one if you like. Or if you want to wander around, go ahead and come and find me when you're done, or I'll be standing over here. To me, that's a person that is going to listen to what I'm saying and let me kind of develop my own opinions without trying to influence me.
How about in the insurance world? How would you know? Because those two I get, but in the insurance world where that person does have more knowledge than you, how do I know that that person isn't trying to take advantage of me?
So, first of all, in the insurance world, if they're a licensed agent and they're independent, the first thing you're going to want to know is how long have you been doing this? You want to make sure that they've got some experience.
You got to start somewhere. What if they're a young buck like
Well,
me?
it could be they're just starting out. And then if they're just starting out, what products do you represent? You want to know what carriers they represent, what plans that those carriers
Should
have.
someone be wary of a captive versus independent? Because for me,
So,
I think
yes.
captive you should, because they can only sell that one product.
Yeah, so if you go to a captive agent, they can only sell you that one product. So if you're with insurance company A and they're the captive agent for them, they're only going to show you what that company has. It may not be your best option. This is why in the insurance field, I think brokers are a better option for most folks because a broker should have no skin in the game, no dog in the fight, so to speak, saying, well, I only have this carrier, so this is the carrier I'm selling you. When they have 5, 6, 7 different insurance companies and they do a needs analysis and they understand what your wants are and they stop talking to you and they listen, to me, that's giving me more confidence in their ability to help me find what I need. Because a consumer just may look on Medicare.gov and may do some superficial research. But if they're dealing with someone, even if they're a rookie, and the rookie has the right tools and has the right confidence, you can spot that right away. You can spot the person, at least from my perspective, that's going to take you down the wrong path. If you have your doctors in Dr. John, and you take these 4 drugs, and if the doctor's in this network and the drugs are within that plan, and they try to send you somewhere else, you can't trust that agent. You got to get up and leave and end it. So, not promoting any particular agency up here. I feel that captives are good folks. They generally have really high ratings, but unless you are already predetermined that's the carrier that you want to go with, as a consumer, you're cutting yourself short.
Yeah.
Right?
And the average person may not even know the difference between independent and captive. So you have to kind of ask them.
Yeah.
It's like when you go to a dealership, we don't consider the terminology captive, but they can only sell you Porsche or whatever. Unless I guess they have used cars.
Yeah,
They can sell you
they have that, but they're
You're not going to Toyota to buy a Ford.
no, unless they happen to be in the used car market.
Yeah.
And they're going to go into that direction. But it's maybe some life skills that one needs to develop to really understand if you're getting conned or not. There are some people that are so good at it that even well-trained individuals to spot the con can't see the con until they're deep into the con.
Yeah, and that's where I think about that a lot as far as there's a guy he's more than up and coming now. His name is Andy Elliott. And he started off as a car salesman, and now he's teaching people how to sell. And I use this analogy of if you're a professional fighter and you're out in the street and some dude comes up and tries to beat you up because he's mad at you, if that professional fighter takes that guy down and aggressively beats him up, guess who goes to jail?
Yeah, the fighter does.
The fighter does because he knows better. But in the sales world, if you're an Andy Elliott or a Grant Cardone, I'm sure you've heard of Grant Cardone, if you're that skilled at communication, you are the professional. The average person that you come in contact with is no match. Just like if I go to a professional fighter, I could be super strong, I could be super quick, but if that guy's highly skilled, he's going to beat me up 99% of the time.
And quickly.
Yes. So if the average person comes to someone that's highly skilled at communication, and that's one thing I like about Patrick Bet-David, he says, once I realized I had the gift of communication, I had to put it on myself to make sure I don't manipulate. And I don't know how many communicators have that foresight to be like, yes, I can actually persuade. Because, I'm educated. No, dude, you have the skills to be able to persuade because you understand psychology and you understand. So that's where it's like, that's tricky. So when I talk to young dudes, I try to plant that seed in their mind to be like, if you stay in this long enough, you will become very skilled at communicating and you will be able to persuade, but you have to make sure that the people mentoring you, you have the self-awareness to know that are they just, they're telling me I'm doing the right thing, but are you actually doing the right thing? Because you can get skilled at communication and you can talk better and be able to manipulate versus educate, finding that line. And so I listened to Andy Elliott just to see what his tactics are because they are very skilled, right? Like when he people come in to learn from him how to sell, and it's like, are you selling or are you manipulating? I don't know, that's a whole other conversation, but okay. I know I was gonna give you my last question, but here's my final one. Um, what is something that you've picked up on life as you got older that you're like, man, if I would have had that knowledge when I was younger, that would have been extremely helpful. I can give you an example if you want, but I think you
So,
understand the premise of the question.
so for me, um, I think my role as it is now, um, and I wish I had the ability as a younger adult to to be able to see the way I see the world right now, because I see the world split in many different fractions. The thing that I see that is the most detrimental to all society is misinformation. And this is going back to you talking about manipulating, being a good communicator. I listen to folks miscommunicating very, very effectively, very much with authority and a lot of confidence.
I mean, you can say that about the news.
Well, yeah, news, politicians, sports teams. There's a lot of misinformation that's purposely given. And and for me, I wish that I would have had the more analytical mind that I have now in my 20s and be able to have had the role I'm in much earlier in life and to roll from that point. And although that would be a very lucrative choice, I'm extremely grateful for every road I've gone down and every path. And when a door's closed, another door is open. And if I could change anything, obviously it would have been not to get hurt,
Right.
because I would have played a boy's game and played and got a man's income.
Yeah.
Right. And with that said, I think my role in the field of insurance really has supplied me with so much internal satisfaction of helping folks. And I went down this path because my dad died and had all those bad insurance policies.
Hmm.
And I wanted to be an advocate for seniors. And my daughter said to me one time, and I was like, hey, you want to get into insurance? And she goes, Dad, insurance is not sexy. It is not cool. And I was like, well, that's cool because that's what puts a roof over the house. That paid for your college education and that paid for this, this, and this. So it may not be sexy and cool. I go, and it's not about the money, but you never hear your dad stressing. You never hear me stress. And so, if I could do things over, that would be one thing, is not to have gotten injured or to have found this career earlier.
Hmm.
But maybe I would have gone to different things after that, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I,
Yeah, I don't ask people if they have regrets, but there's knowledge you pick up when you're older. And then you're like, oh, okay, that not, it just would have been like for me, it was understanding health, nutrition, like, cause I gained a little bit of weight and then I was like, oh, let me dial this stuff in. And now I have it much more dialed in now. And I feel like, man, if I had understood that better in my 20s, I would be in a different position. But for me as a father, and because we homeschool, we have a lot more control over our kids and what they're being taught and input. And so what I'm hoping to do, right, this is the theory, is once they turn all throughout, right, it's not like they hit a certain age and now they have everything. It's a lifetime of them living with me. But the goal is once they get to the point where they can move out, I've given them my knowledge and experience so that when they turn 18, they're not starting at 18 as most 18-year-olds. They're starting at 18, but with all of dad's knowledge and experience that he's passed down. Because that's kind of how civilization worked
Yes.
for the past 9,000 years, except the past 100, where everything's so different, where it's like the elder, what did that point of the elder just to pass down knowledge so that when that person is like, oh, I know how to hunt more effectively. I know how to do all these things because it's been passed down. Because when I turned 18, and no fault of my parents, when I turned 18, I was ill prepared for the real world. No fault to them. My first job was minimum wage because that's all I could do. I'm hoping when my kids are 18, because of everything that I've gone through already, I guess the goal is from 18 to, let's just say 40, that 22 years of experience, I'm now trying to give that to my kids so that when they're 18, again, there's some things in life you just have to go through, right? You can't just learn in a book or through someone else's experience, but hopefully they'll have the knowledge, the skills, and the ability to be worth a little bit more than minimum wage.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
And for me,
Knowing that they can have more value to provide to society. For my first real job was stocking cigarettes in the back of a gas station because I didn't know anything better than that.
And it's interesting, I had jobs in high school. I worked at Trader Joe's, and it was a different type of environment back then. But, I worked a couple hours here, a couple hours there.
Yeah.
My first real job out of high school was not minimum wage.
Yeah.
I was playing for a sports team.
Yeah.
And I was like, was that a good experience? Because honestly, had that maybe played out all the way through, I would have always been at a different level and really probably never had any other life experiences other than what I had on the field. And maybe that was my higher powers way of saying, this is not what you should be doing. And we're going a different direction.
Yeah. There's a book I'm reading now. It's very interesting, talking about quantum physics and stuff I don't normally, where they're talking about there's just different parallels of life that we could have gone through. And knowing just hearing your story, there's a world where had you had a successful baseball career, you probably would have then taken that money and you probably still at the end of the day would have found something to help someone. And that's kind of what Patrick Bet-David is doing because he's worth 500 mil now. And so it's like, he doesn't need a podcast. He doesn't need to be out there helping people the way he is, but that's just the person who he is. Because he started from nothing. He came as an immigrant with $0, negative, right? And, but it's like, so if you would have had more money, I mean, you're probably wealthy now, but if you would have had just athlete type of money, you probably would have found a way to still help people because that's just part of who your DNA was or is.
I want to believe that. I really want to believe that.
Because there are good, wealthy people out there that do make a difference.
And I was coming up with a friend who was a pitcher, and his parents were entertainment executives and executive producers of shows, and tons of money and tons of girls and tons of everything around him. At 16, he's driving a 911 Porsche, and had one of the worst cocaine habits that I've known from any professional athlete. And one day went for a ride in his car and took his seatbelt off and went headfirst into an oak tree, and he was in the tree. And a note inside the car said, "Can't take it anymore. Goodbye."
How old was he?
19. And so,
so he meant to do that.
Yeah, he meant to do it.
That's crazy.
And I can't fathom that at all. And I was just like, wow, that's a perspective that you didn't see coming. We all knew he had a coke habit, but we didn't know the internal strife that he was going through.
Yeah, we could do a whole podcast on wealthy people and their kids who generally don't turn out very
And they were great parents. The parents were nice people.
Yeah.
He just had too much freedom and opportunity because they were always gone working.
Yeah.
We have to stop on something positive, though. But this is awesome.
Well, thank you. I know
pleasure.
I've been trying to do this for a while, and every story I get, it's always very interesting. And I'm sure you know who Tony Robbins is.
Oh yeah.
And so I've learned a lot from him, and he talks about seasons. What's cool when I talk to guys your age is life is no longer theory because you lived it. And so what's cool is when I learn theories, then I listen to someone's story, I can see how those theories played out. And so you talked about the seasons, and Tony Robbins is all about the seasons. Or there's frameworks that I start adopting, and when I see it play out on someone's life, it's like, okay, it just helps reconfirm that potential framework that I'm building in my own life and I'm seeing it. So that's why I really enjoy talking to guys at your age, because it's not like, oh, I think this. It's no, this is what happened. I'm not saying it's the right way or the only way, but it's just I'm a guy that likes to have frameworks, and so it's always cool listening to guys like you. Because of your life, you articulate very well. I always appreciate people that can articulate what it is they did or believe, and I think you had an interesting life. And there may be some stranger that listens to this that does get something out of it. I know I did, and hopefully, like, the goal of this channel is to have a whole plethora. Hopefully there's hundreds, if not thousands, of people that I record, whether it's me or however big it becomes. Maybe my kid starts doing it, or maybe people from other cities start posting channels. I don't know. There's a lot of potentials, but the point is to record people's lives, and then someday you're not going to be here, and maybe your grandkid watches this someday, or your great grandchild, and they get to see a picture of, oh, I know that guy. I'm related to that guy, because I don't have that. I don't have any. I can't look up some video of I'm adopted, but even my parents, I don't have those kind of things that I can fall back on. So this video will, I think, have impact not just on me, but on strangers, but then immediate family, and then people you've never met that can see this and see, this version of you.
It's interesting that you say that. And I know we're wrapping up here.
We're wrapping up for a while.
Yeah. My grandfather says that you have, and he's since passed, in your life, you need to make generational impact. And I never could figure out what he meant. And he would never tell me. And to this day, he would, I never knew. I'd ask my grandmother, and she goes, I don't know, your grandfather says stuff all the time. But what he was really saying is that in your life, as you're shaping your life, everything you do affects your family, your wife, or your significant other, your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren. And finally, I get to understand as I became older, and I have no grandchildren yet, I understand what he means, is to have generational impact. And that means that you do things well. If you can keep generational income coming in for them, that's great. But put them in environments where you've educated their parents, you've done things really well for them, and teach your children how to live and succeed. Not to compete, because competition will hurt people. You have to be creative. People will compete with you. But if you don't create this wisdom that you gain as you get older and impart that on your children, everything that you've done will be lost. Everything that your grandparents have done will be lost. As we get older, my mom had 13 brothers and sisters. My dad was him and his sister. There is one brother left from my mom's side of the family. And both my dad and my aunt are gone as well. So growing up in a massive, huge family, if you think 13 brothers and sisters and how many siblings came out of that, we used to take over parks for parties. But that's that generational thing. And as I look and the families are narrowing, it's what is my impact on the future? Not my carbon footprint, but my character and not necessarily money, but what have I done to help these people be good people, good citizens that produce, and they're not takers, they're givers. And that's the thing that my life really does revolve around. Am I doing a job to make these better people to where they aren't straight consumers and going, gimme, 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 or instead of saying, what can I do to benefit society? So that's me.
I like it. Good. All right, I'll see you around.
All right, thank you.
Maybe I'll become a baseball fan after this game.
I don't think so.